Good morning and welcome to the 2023 City Building Summit Build Up Ottawa. It is so nice to see all of you here this morning. It is now my distinct pleasure to invite His Worship Mayor Mark Sutcliffe to bring greetings from the city. Please offer a warm welcome to Mayor Sutcliffe.
Thank you, Suling. Bonjour tout le monde. C'est vraiment un plaisir d'être ici avec vous ce matin et au nom de la ville d'Ottawa et de mes collègues du conseil municipal, je vous souhaite la bienvenue. I got to tell you, I'm really excited about this event, and I love the name of it, Build Up Ottawa. Who's ready to build up Ottawa this morning? And, you know, I'm going to focus on each of those words individually. So first of all, the word build. You know, we have a unique opportunity right now as a community to build a better future for our children and our grandchildren, to build a better city for everyone. I also like the use of the word up. It's been a difficult 3 years, as Suling said. It's been a challenging time for our city in particular. But I think we need to be very glass half full about things. We need to be optimistic. I'm an optimist by nature, so I like the idea of building up. And let's talk about Ottawa today, because I think we have a lot of challenges as a community, and Suling spoke about many of them. But, you know, I got to say, our challenges are not that unique or unusual. They're the same challenges that are faced by many other communities. And I know, you know, we talk about issues here in Ottawa and we're focused on things that we're noticing. We see homelessness as a big challenge, affordable housing is a big challenge, supportive housing. Many other communities are going through that as well. And I hear from mayors and councillors in other cities all the time about the challenges that they're facing. So these are significant challenges, but we shouldn't be feeling self-conscious about them. We should be feeling like we have an opportunity to solve them if we work together. Even issues like our light rail system, which I hear about a lot in my new job. No question about that. But I got a message from the regional chair, the head of government in Kitchener-Waterloo, and they've had all kinds of issues with their light rail system in the past couple of months. And places like Calgary and Edmonton and Toronto and Montreal, they have issues with their transit as well. So we are not alone. We have challenges, but I don't think our challenges are unique, and if we work together, we can solve them. But I'll tell you what is unique is our opportunity. Our opportunity as the City of Ottawa is unique. There is no other city that has the beauty of our city. There is no other city that has the safety and stability of Ottawa. And especially, there is no other city that has our people, our talent, our leadership, the great people like you who are committed to building up Ottawa. So I see this as a huge opportunity and a unique opportunity. Nobody has the opportunity that Ottawa has to have a great future. So it's events like these that get me excited, because we can talk about what that future will look like, and we can talk about how we're going to work together to get it done. So I'm very excited to see so many colleagues from Ottawa City Council who are here today. Welcome to all of you. It's great to work with you every day on building a better future for Ottawa. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge City of Ottawa staff who are here today. There is a great team at the City of Ottawa. People always ask me, there's 2 or 3 questions people ask me because I have this new job, right? So I go around and people say, what's the biggest thing that surprised you? Or, you know, what's different from what you expected? And there haven't been a whole lot of big surprises, but I'll tell you what's had the greatest impression on me is the incredibly talented team at the City of Ottawa. So there are people who go to work every single day to try to make our city better for everyone. The people who work at the City of Ottawa are dedicated, they are committed, they are loyal, they are compassionate, they are hardworking, and they are here to serve everybody in our city. And I am deeply proud of them, and I'm proud to represent them. So if you are a City of Ottawa employee, would you please stand up now? I'd love to acknowledge all of the City of Ottawa employees who are here today. You're all sitting together. That's nice. You know, I'm going to mention, as I said, I'm an optimist by nature. So, you know, over the last couple of months, I've met with 7 different groups that are interested in buying the Ottawa Senators. And I mention that not just to remind you that I've met Ryan Reynolds, but also to point out that there are 7 different groups that are interested in buying the Ottawa Senators, that are interested in investing in our city, that see this as a place of huge opportunity. They want to build here. They want to win the Stanley Cup here. They want to invest in our community. So when we're inside our city, we sometimes are dealing with all the challenges. We're feeling frustrated. We're looking at all the things that are not going right. But people outside our city who are looking in see enormous opportunity. They see great potential. And there are some very successful business people from throughout North America who want to buy our hockey team and invest in our community. And they want to build a new arena and build things around that arena. They want to invest in our downtown. So, of course, there are challenges with downtown Ottawa because not as many people are coming downtown every day to work. But there are people who want to invest in our downtown and see a great future here and see this as a place of extraordinary opportunity. So I'm very excited. Yes, thank you. Alors, cet événement est exactement ce dont Ottawa a besoin en ce moment. I'm very excited about the discussions that you're going to have today about the downtown core, about attracting more tourists, about boosting the local economy. Again, I always say, you know, we have many priorities as a city, but it is never a choice between economic development and other priorities, because economic development is what drives all of those other priorities. Economic development is what supports and pays for all of those other priorities. If we want to fix homelessness once and for all, if we want to build a safer community, if we want to build a stronger city for everyone, we have to drive economic development, because that is how we will generate the resources to achieve all of those goals. So this summit is an extraordinary opportunity to build and maintain a solid fiscal foundation, to invest in programs and services for residents, so we have the resources to face future challenges, so we have the resources to help the most vulnerable, so we can create jobs, we can increase our incomes, we can improve our standard of living and our quality of life, you know, which are already the envy of North America, frankly. Alors, poursuivons ce travail de collaboration afin de construire une ville meilleure pour tous, une ville sûre, fiable, et abordable. We need to build a city that can manage sustainable growth, a city that imagines a better future and works hard to achieve it, a city that cares. And I know this is a city that cares. It's a city that volunteers. It's a city that invests in itself. There are so many people like you who put not just your energy, but your time into building a better city, into building a better community, into supporting the most vulnerable. And I think we should all be grateful for the fact that Ottawa is a city that cares. So I know everybody's eager to get to work. I hope you have a great session today. I'm looking forward to hearing everything that comes out of today. There's so much potential for our city right now, and I want to thank you all on behalf of the City of Ottawa. I want to thank you on behalf of the people of Ottawa for your commitment to our future. So let's work together. Let's truly work together. Travaillons ensemble, and let's build up Ottawa. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mayor Sutcliffe. I'm not sure what qualifies you to be a politician, though, because I'm not sure that anybody's ever actually finished when they said they were going to. So we are now currently right on time. I appreciate your remarks very much, your leadership and your support for our business community and our community as a whole. It's really an honor to work with you. Thank you. So, Canadian downtowns, as Mark said, are all being challenged by the shift that we're seeing. They are highly strategic economic areas. In 2018, Canada's metropolitan areas accounted for more than 60% of our national GDP and more than 82% of our population. The pandemic has significantly changed these downtowns. The sudden and prolonged absence of employees, visitors, and students has resulted in a drastic drop in traffic for merchants. And despite the positive impact of the progressive return to office, school, and travel, the growing trends in remote work and online commerce have caused a paradigm shift. Our first session today, Revitalizing Downtown, invites national leaders to share their perspective on downtowns in Canada's largest metropolitan areas, and where possible, to help us garner insights about the Ottawa context. Ottawa is unique as the nation's capital and because of our large public sector footprint. Now is the time to transform our downtown to create a vibrant and diverse Ottawa. To have this conversation, please help me welcome to the stage Stephen Willis, Senior Principal, Discipline Leader, Urban Planning for Stantec; Stéphane Derry, President and CEO of Canada Lands Company; and welcoming you back to Ottawa, Mary Rowe, President and CEO of the Canadian Urban Institute. Please welcome our guests. Okay. We just have to turn them on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Are we on? Yes? Okay. Good morning. Well, thank you all three for being here, some from Ottawa, some from afar. Stéphane, I might start with you, actually, and welcome. And I wondered if you could just share with us the work that you do, the work of your organization, and how you interact with cities.
Keep talking, it's going to fit.
Yeah.
There you go. Fantastic. Thanks, Sulan. Happy to be here. And probably they start with me because I'm the only one that doesn't have a slide deck to present. So I'll talk a little bit, and I'm not sure in which function I'm invited. So I'll talk a little bit about the job I had 13 days ago. I was Assistant Deputy Minister for Real Property Services at Public Services and Procurement Canada, so responsible for a portfolio of 6.9 million square meter across the country of office space. 6 million of that was office space, and you know what happened to office space during the pandemic. Half of the portfolio is leased, half of the portfolio is owned, and half of the portfolio of that 6 million, 6.4 million square meter is in the National Capital Region. So 3-point-some million of that office space in the National Capital Region. So I was managing that portfolio with all the project that it entailed. And some of you may be more interested as we're talking about Ottawa, the city of Ottawa. Some of the projects are underway that PSPC Real Property Services is delivering. The West Memorial Building rehabilitation, which will host the Supreme Court while the Supreme Court will undergo recapitalization. Lester B. Pearson Building that we're recapitalizing. The 875 Aaron Road that was at RFQ, not too long ago. These are some of the projects that the Government of Canada, through its real property arm, Real Property Services, is delivering in the National Capital Region. So that was my work as Assistant Deputy Minister. Now, 13 days ago, and forgive me if I don't know every single thing about the corporation, I was appointed President and CEO of Canada Lands Company. So Canada Lands Company is an arm's length self-financing ground corporation that buys property that are surplus to the Government of Canada, property that they don't need anymore, Rockcliffe base, military base as an example, Downsview in Toronto. And from coast to coast, we buy surplus property from the Government of Canada and redevelopment into vibrant community. So we work with every city across Canada where we own property in order to rehabilitate them, bring them back into vibrant community. A lot of consultation that we do with the community to ensure that the social acceptability of what we want to do, but also that we promote and we advance government priorities such as greening, accessibility, social housing, indigenous reconciliation. So all of our projects are embedded in all of our projects are these components to advance government priority. In Ottawa, as an example, we are working on Project 299 Carling is one of our projects. River Ridge, did I get that right, Tara? River Ridge is the old Rockcliffe base that we are rebuilding right now, developing. We're also working on master planning for Tunney's Pasture, where we are working with Public Services and Procurement Canada, my old department, working with them to recapitalize some of the building, but also to redevelop and the area, and also working at 1500, not 1500, but the whole Confederation Heights redevelopment project, where we're doing consultation with the municipality, consultation with the community to see how we can redevelop that site into, again, a place where people can work, live, and play into a vibrant community. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. And we appreciate all the work that you did at RPS, but we really appreciate you joining us here today as you embark on this new role and your concept of consulting with the communities that you're in. Thank you for being here. Stephen Willis, what is it you do at Stantec?
So my new role is I'm the discipline lead for urban planning in the Canadian practice of the company. So we're a global consulting firm, and we do work in community development, which is my world, transportation, water, environment, mining, and energy, buildings, a whole sector of things. And the nice thing is, most of you know me from my old jobs, and I spent a good decade looking at Ottawa through a microscope, working with you and others in the room on many of the issues here. But now I get to look at Canada through a panoramic lens, which is my job is looking at what's going on around the country. So I'm going to show a few slides to set the tone for where Ottawa stands with what's going on in North America. And I'm riffing off a little bit of some of the mayor's comments about how we're doing. Some of those slides are not easy to look at in those numbers, but compared to where we stand in our class of cities, we have work to do for sure, and Mary's going to talk more about that as well. But I want to show you where we stand. So I'm going to switch to the podium.
Oh, sure.
So, is this microphone working? Are you able to, now I can get the feedback now. So first of all, there is a new reality. If you talk to both employees and employers, people are not returning to the office 5 days a week as they did before. That world has come and gone, and it's changed, and there may be some employers where that's true, but for the vast majority of employers, and this is data from PwC, that both sides see a very changed world of a hybrid work environment. This is the sooner we embrace this reality and move on from this point and redefine what the hybrid world is, the easier it will be to come up with strategies for our cities of the future. So, in terms of this is a slide that talks about what people's expectations are in terms of the return to work and the implications in downtowns. And this is from the City Centre Development Corporation of Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is roughly in a comparable size range as Ottawa. That's why I brought that as an example. I think it's pretty indicative of it. The change is embedding and setting in. You know, we didn't bounce back to the way we were quickly, so now it's a progressive change. So what we need is our adaptation strategies, not a chance of trying to go back. And those adaptation strategies have to think about the impact. So this is a return to work barometer, and these are largely American cities, and I have some data in a minute that shows where we are in terms of Canadian cities, but it really shows that we're somewhere about halfway back to where we once were in almost every major city in North America. And this has real effects, yes, we've come to a great deal of convenience, but there is a very substantial underlying economic changes happening. So in terms of the small retail businesses that were in the downtown, that many of us as employees supported when we worked downtown, they are finding that foot traffic 3 days a week is not enough to keep the business open. And they are closing in large numbers, and we're seeing it increasingly around the continent. see restaurants close, shoe repairs, dry cleaners, people who provide professional services, even dentists' offices are moving out of the core and reestablishing in other areas of the city. In Toronto right now, Avison and Young has estimated that foot traffic in the path system, which connects all the major buildings, is about 40% of what it was pre-pandemic. And 40% of the foot traffic will change everything in the way that entire system will actually work. So this is not a new trend, though. This is not something that just was precipitated by the pandemic. If you actually look at the longer-term trend, and this is over a 20-year look, there have been declines in the amount of new office creation all around North America, and more companies were already moving to hybrid work ever since the technology made that possible. What the pandemic did is it took a long-term trend line and put it on steroids and made it actually happen a lot faster. So we're seeing the consequences of a long-term trend. But when we talk again about the other side of the equation, the significant part, and I apologize to every commercial landlord in the room, because I'm not giving you a happy story, is that the actual value of office buildings are declining across North America. And what the knock-on effect of that is, and I don't want to worry the city councilors in the room, is that the commercial property taxation from the commercial office class will drop and continue to drop over the next 5 years, maybe to 10. And to put real numbers on this, Washington, D.C., the other capital in North America, is lost $464 million in revenue as a city because of declining assessed values in commercial real estate. Luckily for Ontario cities, that we have a very slow process of reevaluating the valuation of property, so it will take time for us to see this. San Francisco, which had a very, very large office component as their economy, it's actually one of the hardest hit cities in all of North America, has lost $728 million in revenue from lower taxation, from lower assessed values. Now, this slide shows the problem is that downtowns had become too office dependent. The cities that will struggle the hardest are the ones that don't have a mixed economy in their downtown or a mixed use of their downtown. The healthiest downtowns are the ones that have a large residential population so that things are balanced out a little bit. And the reason why a large residential population is important for all those knock-on is you need about 1,000 people within a 5-minute walk of any business in order to support it. So you need those density levels to be there in order to do it. So a permanent downtown residential population gives you that economy and that vibrancy, and it allows shocks in the system to be absorbed a little bit more easily. This slide was brand new. It's just come out. It's data that goes back to November, but what it shows is the Downtown Vibrancy Index that's been put together by University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Toronto. And this is based on cell phone activity in the downtown, and it's about people whose cell phones ping a tower in the downtown core. And as you can see, across North America, it varies quite substantially. So Ottawa's in the class, and we're in the mid-sized cities. We're about 2/3 of the way down the list on the right-hand side. And the left-hand side is the largest cities in the world, in North America. And we're all roughly in the same space. If you look at Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City, Toronto, we're all in about 50-something% range as well. So we certainly are not in the ones that have bounced back the fastest, but we're also not at the bottom of the list. But it does show you that, to the point the mayor made, is that we're all cities around North America are suffering from the same challenges and looking for the same sets of solutions. So I'm going to wrap up really quickly because there are others to talk. So really what we need to focus in on is over the next 2 decades, the large majority of new households who live in cities will tend to be singles or couples who prefer strong, mixed-use, walkable places. This is where the demographic, that's what they want to live in. So if we can look at that as an opportunity and pair that up with the downtown problem, there really are a number of potential solutions. And the 2 cities in Canada that have done the most so far, and I know Mary's going to talk a little bit more of this as well, to look at this because they've been looking at it longer than we have because they started before the pandemic looking at the health of their downtowns, is first of all Montreal, sorry. The clicker's not working. Are you able to advance the slide for me, please? Yeah, so the city of Montreal, I mean, Montreal's been facing a difficult downtown condition all the way back to the 1970s when the separatism scare caused a lot of people to leave Montreal. And they as a downtown have been working on strategies, and they have focused very heavily in the last decade of having more downtown living. So if you go to downtown Montreal, there are tower cranes in the air for the last number of years, and they are all residential development that's being built, and they've gone in impressively in terms of focusing on residential development and programming for the arts and culture in the downtown core. And Montreal's strategy, therefore, is ahead of every other city in Canada, in my opinion, in terms of looking at the future, and they are very well positioned for this. And then Calgary, Mary's worked directly with Calgary with some of my colleagues out in our Western offices looking at that. And Calgary had the oil shock that caused them to look at how to repurpose their downtown after all the major head offices of oil companies downsized considerably. And this was pre-pandemic. So these cities have been at it longer than the rest of us. And I think there are some clues to our future in terms of the work they've already done. So thanks for that. I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you, Stephen. Mary, what is it that you do at the Canadian Urban Institute?
Go where I'm invited.
Thank
Thanks
goodness.
for having me back.
Yeah, thank you for coming back.
Delighted. We're in the connective tissue business at CUI. I'm really happy to see all of you again. I want to just challenge you. If you're 60 or over, stand up. Come on, I'm not the only 60 or over person here. If you're 60 or over. Now, we're going to play a little game here. I'm going to give you a song lyric, and you're going to give me the last line, all right? You listening? 60 or over? Not very many of us 60 or over. Here, I'm going to start. When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go Petula Clark. Petula Clark, anyone? I have some slides too, but I just want to breeze right through them and just say a couple of things about this. The reason I use that Petula Clark thing, my father loved that song. It was in the 60s. We were at a cottage. We went to try to buy him an LP, the record downtown. But here's what's interesting about the 1960s in downtown. You didn't go downtown to work. You went downtown because it was a place. It was a place where things were happening. It was a place where you saw things and met people and experienced things that you could experience nowhere else. It was a unique place. Somewhere in the 80s, we decided that, maybe it was the 70s, we decided that downtowns would become monocultures where you just had office space, and that's what you did. You went to work for the man downtown. And we've got to now claim that back to being a really exciting place. And that's what you guys have in spades. You have a downtown that is a place. You have all sorts of amenities and things. Lots of places don't. Been to Phoenix? Trust me. It's not a place. There's no, as Gloria, there's no there. And I think the key point here, I'll just breeze through these maybe, is, we're trying to make this conversation at CUI about the future of cities generally. So downtowns are part of a larger strategy, but they're part of a piece. It's not only one solution, it's a whole bunch of solutions, which includes addressing all these things. But downtowns are kind of the canary in the coal mine, petri dish. Everything that's good about a city is downtown. Everything that's bad about a city is downtown. So we got to start there. And you already know why downtowns matter. You actually statistically matter economically. We always have to put that argument in because people don't listen if it's not about economics. But it's got to be about a whole bunch of other things. These are all stats that you already know. Sadly, you lead on a bunch of crummy indicators. Don't let that discourage you, though, because, and this is the other thing. We talked about this at dinner last night. There's a ton of popular media that's not favorable towards you. Sadly, that was true before the pandemic, so you just kind of wear it. It's just part of the, it's like everybody hates Toronto. So you're going to have a hard time turning that message around. Part of what we did is commission this. We were commissioned by the CMHC to do this report on looking at adaptive reuse, exactly what Steve and I think Stefan are getting at, that buildings in downtowns have to be repurposed all the time. And my colleague Jennifer Baird, who's here in the front, led this study and knows everything about every building in the country that could be repurposed. If you want to know about it, she knows. It's not the total answer, but it's a principle about how we understand continuing to allow cities to evolve and buildings in cities to evolve for different purposes. If you look in European cities, you will see that a building may have been a this, and then it was a that, and then it went back to being a this. We're young. We're a young country. Our cities are young relatively. So when you think about why these things matter, if you need a slide to tell your neighbors why your work matters, you can borrow this slide from us and use it. It's kind of a no-brainer. All these things are important, and the fate of the country hangs on how our cities do. That's all there is to it. The way that our democracy is organized, it's sometimes hard to know that, but that is true, that if we don't invest in our cities, if we don't find new strategies for our cities, the Canadian economy and the Canadian social fabric is not going to hold. So it's important for us to try to convey that to people in a way to understand why it matters what we're doing. I put this up because Mayor Daley, the first Mayor Daley, the father, was criticized. Why was he spending so much time and energy on downtowns? And he replied and said, because an apple rots from the core. So that's why we need to spend special attention to this. And then I've borrowed these quotes that Jen put in her report around Yogi Berra, that nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. And that you can't rely on downtowns to have people there, you've got to put them there. The other critical part of the core, we at CUI have two lenses to look at cities. One is downtowns in the core, and the other is the spine of the city, your main streets. And so you've got to forge alliances with the business improvement area folks, all the people that are engaged in community life at the ground level, at the street level. That's so critical that you stitch together that relationship. Because when we started, during the pandemic, we started something called Bring Back Main Street, and people said, oh, you're giving up on downtowns, are you? And I said, no, no, no. This is the two sides of the same coin. It's all about the quality of places and places being different. And in fact, downtowns have main streets as part of their anatomy. And what you want to do is invest in different kinds of ways depending on the particular assets of that main street or that neighborhood. So part of what Steve is getting at is you want a downtown to become more of a complete neighborhood and to become its own distinct neighborhood. And you have so many assets to work with. As I said, go to Phoenix. That it's a question now of how you can stitch together a narrative and work collaboratively on that. So,
Thank you, Mary. That's why we keep inviting you back to Ottawa, because you're so passionate about it and you sing songs. We really appreciate that. Stefan, I might go back to you to ask the next question. In your experience, what other cities have you seen, Canada or otherwise? What are your observations about what they're facing pre-pandemic and today?
Thank you. I'm going to speak a little bit on the government perspective. Last week, I'm also the president of the Workplace Network, which is a worldwide organization of government that own real estate. So 14 to 15 country work together day in and day out to see what others are doing and learning from their experience. Last week I was in Washington and we seen the same thing as we see in Ottawa. It was the same in the state before the pandemic. 60% of government office were utilized day in and day out. In Europe, they had 0.7 offices per employee. They already had moved to a smaller footprint and already pre-pandemic, so not everybody had their office, so they already had moved. So more population, different population, eating in restaurants throughout the week. Now they're aiming, after the pandemic, they're aiming to 0.5 office per employee. Again, shrinking their footprint, talking government, national government here. In the States, we see the same thing. Government buildings are empty. Washington is basically, there's a lot of tourism, so that's something we could work. Ottawa is the same thing. So how can we take some of these buildings, convert them into housing, really bringing life, and that's what Mary was talking about, bringing life into the downtown. I think that's the only thing we could do, and Canada Land's definitely willing to work with the federal government to take some of those buildings and bring them into the market to make really vibrant place where people want to live and not only come to work. Basically, they want to live there.
Thank you very much. Steve, you touched on a couple of other cities. Do you have other examples of what you've seen in downtowns and in your work?
I had a chance last week to talk to some of my colleagues in different parts of North America about what they're seeing on the ground. And what I think were the cities who are focusing a lot on creating downtown arts and cultural opportunities and downtown populations and small business support for adaptation, focused on the smallest businesses, are the ones who, again, are leading the foot race on recovery right now. Lots of communities are trying to say, we're still in this waiting game to see if it's going to bounce back more. So we're at 50% now. Are we going to get to 70? Where are we going to? The cities that are, you know, the Pittsburghs, the Montreals and Calgarys, the kind of the Boston suburbs who are saying, okay, we're moving on already. It's like we're not going to track that number anymore. We're not going to worry about that number anymore. It doesn't matter what our percentage is. This is our plan to move forward. Are the ones that are having success right now. And I think the worst thing is to be indecisive and wait, expecting to replicate what was there, 2018. That's not going to happen. So I think that's the important point that we have to kind of get ourselves around. And I think, the work that Stephane's team does and the work that others about an orderly withdrawal from the office space presence of a largest employer in the region is actually going to be really helpful to all of us, because it'll allow that transition to happen. But it also has to happen in the private sector as well.
Great. Thank you. Mary, what are you seeing in other cities?
I think here's the dilemma you've got as a public sector dominated city, is that you have an expectation that things will be done in orderly, kind of predictable, I see people nodding their heads, a PowerPointy kind of way. But the really great cities in our culture are ones that are haphazard and mixed up and kind of complicated and not predictable. And so you need to embrace the chaos side of this and try to temper your expectation that it's going to be predictable and planned out, and just be really opportunistic. And I agree with Steve that the granular approach to that is, how do we, and it'll be interesting to see if Canada Lands can do it under your leadership, it's up to you, to get this into smaller pieces. Get this into smaller pieces, because the days of big mega projects, with all due respect to the developers around the table who are dying to do a mega project, knock yourselves out. You've got lots of chances. But in fact, and I was talking to somebody coming in, a landscape architect, we were talking about the value of smaller interventions. So do not underestimate the opportunity to just build this back block by block by block. And remember that's why people come. That's why Petula was right. You come into an environment because you're curious, because you're going to see or experience or purchase or interact in a way that you haven't before. And so do not underestimate that. And I would really be cautious about it's a bit of a Canadian thing, and it's certainly a thing in cities that are dominated by public service, is that you wait for some big, grand gesture, big, grand plan. It ain't the solution. You heard it here first.
Mary, I'll just stick with you. So from your unique perspective, what opportunities do you see specifically for revitalizing downtowns, and anything that you see specific to Ottawa? And just based on what you shared just now, this concept of a whole of community approach, what do you see as the big opportunities?
Well, again, when we look at Calgary, and is there anybody here from Calgary? You're everywhere. Nobody from Calgary here. Nobody here has ever lived in Calgary? You lived in Calgary. So, the tendency now is, hello, Calgary. The tendency now is to say, oh, well, Calgary's got the answer. Well, Calgary has had 9 years of it, and they've had to try to figure out what would a made in Calgary answer look like. And they had a similar vulnerability to yours, in that they were overly dependent on one economic sector. And when that, the lack of diversity in their economy was as much a challenge for them as yours is here. So the question for you is going to be, how do you now take advantage of this? You know, we can use all sorts of worn adages, making lemons out of lemonade, but in fact, you already had all sorts of entrepreneurial activity that was operating under the radar. As I suggested with that slide showing all the popular media, you've got an uphill battle here to change a narrative around Ottawa, which is probably not reflective of what's really true, what each of you is doing in your local neighborhood, in your local community. So what I would suggest is that the city, I'm looking at you, Cindy, and your colleagues, the city needs to find ways to make it easier to do unusual things. You need to get kind of out of the way and find a way to create more enabling and more permission. I lived in Charlottesville, Virginia, and used to go to Washington, D.C. for a bit of fun. And I can tell you, Washington, D.C. was not always fun. It really wasn't. But it is now, and it is largely because of the neighborhood interventions and the weird little developer projects that popped up in certain neighborhoods that nobody thought anybody would invest in. In fact, I was thinking, sitting listening to the mayor, thinking, you guys should create some kind of an exchange with your peers in Ottawa, in Washington, and have a conversation and go and look at the neighborhoods in Washington and look at the downtown and how that has transformed over the last 15 or 20 years. So my encouragement of you is that you build a really diverse, broad coalition of interest that are going to wrap their arms around Ottawa and make Ottawa what you believe it to be. And don't wait. And try to see if you can get yourself out of this kind of victim position where, oh, the federal government did this, or, oh, the pandemic did that, or Big Bad Canada Lands is doing this, and get to a place where you've locked arms with them so that you're together going to create a really interesting capital for the country. I think everybody's watching, and I think you've had moments in your history where you've emerged in this way, and I think you can emerge again. But you've got to lead that kind of diverse charge.
Thank you, Mary. Yep. Stefan, do you want to go next? What opportunities do you see in cities for downtowns, but anything in Ottawa?
In Ottawa, definitely. We have a lot of work in Ottawa as Canada Lands Company, but you know, can I be honest? Ottawa's an office city. It's a 9-to-5 city. Most of the time, 9 to 5, except on summer when there's visitor and tourism. So people come to work. Makes me think of Regina also is a little bit of a 9-to-5 city. People come to work, they go home. We have an opportunity of a lifetime to change that, to Mary's point, building small community, attracting people, but we also have a lot of building stock downtown that could help us to bring people living downtown, being there 7 days a week because that's where they live. Toronto, as an example, they're thinking Microsoft moved from Mississauga, they shrink their footprint, but they moved to the CIBC building straight downtown. Why? Because they want to attract talent. And where does the talent live in Toronto? They live downtown. They're the young kid on the street. If you walk the street at night, it's full of people. They're young, they're out of university, they live in a a small one-bedroom or in a flat, and they work downtown. They can't work from home because the apartment's too small, so they have to go to work. Think about Europe, it's a little bit of the same thing, right? They have smaller footprint. They don't live in 4,000 square foot home in the middle of the suburb of Ottawa. They live in 500 square feet apartments, so they don't want to stay there the whole day. They want to go out and they're going to go to work. So can we build apartment downtown here where young people coming out of Ottawa U will decide to stay and start living here so we make a vibrant community? And that's what Canada Land wants to do with this redevelopment project, is really work with the federal government to make sure that we get there in this Ottawa, that we get there with a vibrant downtown. And I'll close on that. I also manage the CN Tower in Toronto. So an attraction, 1.5, 1.7 million visitor a year. You know, we have Parliament here that people come and see and visit. We can take advantage of that also and thrive, make sure the city thrive behind that. And fully agree, Mary, on reducing the red tape and taking some risk, because otherwise we're not gonna move if we wait for the federal government to bring back their employee 5 days a week. Even if they tried, we see in across North America, it's not working. Hybrid is here to stay, and it's going to continue. As Stephen says, the trend was started before the pandemic, and it's just accelerated in the pandemic.
Thank you, Stefan. Stephen, what opportunities do you see in other cities and specifically Ottawa?
Well, I think the reality is that, and I'm an eternal optimist about cities. Cities reinvent themselves. That's what they've done for thousands of years before governments really paid attention, before planning existed, economic development existed. Cities reinvent themselves depending on cycles and the like. And I remember quite vividly that early in my career, I lived in downtown Toronto, and I worked for the government of Ontario at one point and managed to get out about 3 weeks before the pink slip came, when Mike Harris came in and cut the provincial civil service by a third. And the provincial government unloaded an enormous amount of office space onto the market, and that office space, because of the recession of the early 90s, took a while to happen. But 10 years later, all of that office space that was redundant was absorbed back. You know, some of those buildings were converted, some of them were knocked down and replaced with new buildings. The parking lots that were there in the 1990s are gone now. You can't find parking anywhere, by the way, in downtown. And if you do, you pay and take out a mortgage to park your car. So all that, the city adapted. It did it. It went through a shock, and it bounced back. Now, what's the bounce back plan? How do we do it? How do we enable it? Mary's quite right. We have to let it get a little messier. We have to be really creative. We have to be open-minded. We can't be looking in the rearview mirror and set the rules based on what used to happen. We have to look and be open-minded on a future basis of being, okay, maybe something different will happen here. So I think to remain optimistic, because I still believe Ottawa has all of the natural assets that make it a beautiful city to live in. The quality of life here is really, really high compared to other cities. I think we can get there, but we just have to, as I said, be open to the fact that it's not a reset to before, it's a look forward.
I agree. Thank you very, very much. So I'm just going to open it up now to the floor and see if anybody who's here has a question for any of our panelists this morning. Yes, there's a mic coming to you. If you can stand up and introduce yourself and who your question is for, that would be great.
Smaller apartments might work for them, but what happens to them when they become families? And I feel like, and this has been, a pet peeve of mine, we are not building our cities for family life. So if we then drive the young couple who now has one kid out to the suburbs, that kid's growing up in a suburb, he's not a downtown kid anymore, and we go through another cycle. So I'm a bit concerned about that statement, and maybe you can answer. And the second question I had was for Stéphane, is why does it take Canada Lands so long to bring a project to fruition when we're dying to build houses, and now we're pushing the urban boundaries out where you have prime urban real estate to develop?
So I'll try to tackle the first question. First and foremost, every North American city struggles with the idea of accommodating families in the downtown. It is a function of the costs per square foot of real estate, and it is 100% related to people's capacity to pay for that. Lots of people make choices. I remember I made the choice just before we had children that we moved from downtown Toronto out to a suburban area, and that was not the choice I wanted to make. It was driven by my capacity and what my affordability was. And I'm representative of, I'd say, probably 90% of the population who end up making the same decision. So but it's not just Ottawa. This is not a unique. Toronto, Vancouver suffer from it in a much more extreme way. Now, there are things that governments do that exacerbate that problem, and one of it is let the schools deteriorate, let the playgrounds deteriorate. The minute the schools don't offer that. I remember looking for a place to live in Ottawa, and because two of my kids have special needs, I couldn't get downtown schools or even inner city schools that serviced my kids' needs. I had no choice but to go to suburbs. So government decisions do play into this. I'm a big believer that school decisions make a huge part of that point, but cities, what they have to do is enable multiple family dwelling types in the downtown core. And I know with the new official plan of the City of Ottawa and what the provincial government has done recently is more multifamily housing types are now permitted as of right in the world, and that will give more chances for more affordable products to be built if the development community follows that lead and actually provides the product to people. So it's a very, very difficult question, and Mary probably has more to add to this than I do.
I'm just going to jump in, even though you didn't ask me, I'll just, my 2 cents on this. If you map across the country a block off main streets, you will find people who are overhoused. We have historically had family housing a block off a main street forever. You walk any main streets, you'll see it. And there's a widow there or an older couple there with 3 empty bedrooms. That's why Airbnb happened, right? And so we've got to try to find a way to, you're going to agree with me or disagree? Okay, because I think we have the stock. We want to do a piece of work now on how do you reintroduce housing onto main streets, because family multi-unit housing is critical, and we've got to just figure out how to get the math and the pro forma to work so that the development community will actually care about this and actually intensify those, because there's a lot of built form that we could be using differently. No?
I agree that there are a lot of elderly people who are what you call as overhoused. However, they are also the corporate memories of our neighborhoods and communities. They are also the grandparents to the children who don't have those people around. And the boxes being built are so
No, I'm agreeing with you.
tiny,
Yeah.
they have zero appeal to those people who don't want to part with their dining room sets.
So we've got to find a way to create multi-gen housing so they can actually stay in that dwelling, and then their kids or their grandparents or other people move in, right? We've just got to get imaginative about this.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah. I'm sure the city's listening. You could do something really interesting. You could lift some rules. It would be very interesting, and you would be leading the way.
Thank you for the question. Definitely, we want to accelerate. There's a lot of consultation that goes into a major development like the 310 acre that is Water Ridge, the old Rockcliffe base. So a lot of consultation with community to ensure acceptability. There's consultation also with indigenous community. So in this case, we have a partnership with AOO. So all of this take time, permits, master plan with the city. There's definitely a way to accelerate, but there's also the absorption by the developer and the availability. Like we have a lot of labor shortage in any construction market, either on high rise and low rise. So that's all issue that makes us slowing down the development of these large parcel of land, but we're looking to accelerate. That's one of the objective of the federal government, accelerate disposal of surplus asset and bring them back to market as soon as possible.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you for the question. We have another one over here.
Steve Georgopoulos. So I commend the Ottawa Business Journal for doing what you do this year and other years. I'm going to pass the mic to my good friend Daniel here, and then I'll ask my question. And Daniel's from Youth Ottawa.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Burstinu, and I'm one of the representatives from Youth Ottawa. And my question is for Mary, but also for all of the panel. How can we engage youth in downtown development apart from, I guess, new developments and new buildings? And what role do you see youth play in shaping a city's vision?
Can you just come home with me, and you and I are going to become best friends, and we'll start to talk about this? I need more people like you. I think it sort of ties into Steve's question about schools. If we could find ways, and there are organizations like Evergreen across the country that work on schoolyards and work on creating different kinds of spaces around schools, but part of what we're trying to do is encourage young people to engage in the quality of their community and realize they can make a difference to it as soon as they hit school. So I think part of it is one of the concerns we have along main streets, for instance, is that we used to historically have institutions that would find a way to engage everybody. So churches, faith institutions, community centers, libraries, schools, all these ways in which you had an opportunity to actually engage in community life. And I worry for my generation of parents that we somehow lost our track of that, and we've raised kids that don't actually have access to those kinds of services. So part of what we need to do is encourage the institutional life that exists in our neighborhoods to be connecting with schools and connecting with youth groups and connecting with community programs so that you have lots of ways to contribute. And so that you will then start contributing as a young teen and then through university, and then it'll just be part of who you are, and you will grow into that role. And I think that the other thing, and you'll hear Mike Moffat, Mike and I were both in Peterborough on Thursday, so I had a sneak peek at what he's going to talk to you about. And he is going to talk to you about investing in amenities for young kids and for young families. And what would be good is for you to challenge him and say, well, it's not just about housing. It's actually about how are we creating a culture of engagement that includes everyone. So it's so great you're here.
Thank you for saying that. The concept, that's the whole concept of an abundant community, that everybody in the community has something to offer. And then as leaders, our role is to find a way to leverage that. Stefan or Stephen, did you want to speak to the youth element of the question?
Just wanted to add, on all of our development in the city of Ottawa and across the country from Newfoundland to British Columbia, we have open door, we have consultation with the community. Please get involved. You can help us shape those future community so that they meet the needs of the youth that are in the community. So please get involved as soon as, and I'm willing to connect with you and ensure that you're involved every time there's a public consultation on the future of our communities that we're building around this city. Could I give Sean an answer?
Yeah.
Open to look at other ways of doing things. Obviously, Canada Lands Company is a self-financing company, so we have to be viable. The government doesn't give us property, they sell us property at market value, and we have to redevelop them. Now in a lot of our project, we have 20% affordable housing instead of 10, so we're increasing our objective to meet government objective. We're also working, and I don't know if there's somebody from CMHC here, but we're also working with CMHC and their federal land initiative, which is also a really good opportunity to take some older stock building and converting them into social housing and all that. And discussion with them, they already have a few buildings in town that they're sites, I should say, that they're looking at to bring. And again, they're going to work with the private sector and developer to achieve that.
Thank you, Stefan. So that's all the time that we have. Thank you very much. Can we have a big round of applause for all of our expert panelists? And I want to thank you, Stephen, for the work that you're doing and volunteering with the Board of Trade. Stefan, welcome to your new role, and we look forward to an ongoing relationship with you. And Mary, it's always a pleasure to have you. This is just the beginning of our conversation, hopefully, in our work together for the downtown in Ottawa and our whole region. So we really appreciate you being here and the work that you're doing.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
I'm Derek Fage, and I encourage you to join me each and every weekday at 2 p.m. for an edition of Daytime Ottawa. We will share with you some fabulous stories, inspirational stories, and of course, recipes from local chefs. We'll tell you about some wonderful musical performances, introduce you to local businesses and charities, and so much more. Join us here on Daytime Ottawa at 2 p.m. weekdays with repeats at 6 and 11 p.m.
Bonjour tout le monde. Bon matin. Good morning. So I'm thrilled to be here. So as was said already, I've been with the NCC just recently. I've only been with the NCC for 4 months. So fairly new. So it's no surprise if I say this is my first time at this event. And I'm thrilled to be here this morning. So my wife and I chose Ottawa to settle and grow roots a few years ago, exactly for what Mayor Sutcliffe said earlier this morning. It's because of the opportunities that we have here in Ottawa. So happy to be here. I've already run into some old-time friends here in the room, so networking is going well. So Councillor Hill, I'm not sure if he's still here. Him and I were roommates 25 years ago. So that that connection with the city of Ottawa, there he is. I'll keep the stories to myself. We'll keep this formal for this morning. But I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy for the opportunities to work with the city. I want to thank Su-Ling Ching. Thank you very much for the invite this morning to speak. I want to thank the Ottawa board as well for the I'll say it properly, the Ottawa Board of Trades. I'll learn the jargon. But knowing those, that we have a very close relationship between the two organizations, a value-added partner is very, very important to us. So thank you for that. And of course, thank you for the organizers for making this event such a success year after year. So thank you very much. So as this session is themed Driving Growth, I've been asked to say a few words about the NCC's role in driving that growth, growing a healthy city. So one thing I want to quickly maybe mention about the NCC is a bit of the history, right? It was created in 1899, so over a century ago, and it was brought into a crown corporation in 1959. So we've been around for a long time, and I think it's important to mention what the mission is. I'm only going to say it once, though, but so the mission, it's to look decades ahead to ensure that the planning, development, conservation, and improvement of the capital reflects the significance of Canada's seat of national government. So it's really planning ahead, making sure that those important assets that we have in the capital regions are looked after and planned accordingly, and working with all the partners that we have here in the room today. So that's what makes this type of venue so important to us. There's 3 roles really that we do with at the NCC, 3 main lines. So there's a long-term planification. So la planification à long terme de nos espaces publics. Il y a l'intendance de ces lieux publics-là, donc s'assurer qu'ils sont développés, qu'ils représentent les Canadiens, les valeurs canadiennes, et puis qu'on garde notre histoire et notre patrimoine au cœur de la capitale nationale. Il y a 4 grands secteurs, évidemment, vous connaissez tous le parc de la Gatineau, la ceinture de verdure, les résidences officielles. Donc, tous ces lieux-là, on s'assure de garder un œil près là-dessus, et ça se fait avec les partenaires. Tous les projets qu'on a au sein de la capitale nationale, et puis de l'autre côté de la rivière aussi, on en a une panoplie. Il y en a 5 majeurs que je veux mentionner rapidement ce matin, parce que c'est des projets qui sont en développement. Si on regarde par les fenêtres, bon, on ne les voit pas ici, là, mais il y a Kewiki Point, pas trop loin. c'est pas juste de développer ces sites-là, mais c'est d'en faire des lieux d'habitation, des lieux d'attraction pour la population, as much for people living in the region, but for people visiting the national capital. So one of the big projects we're doing is the Lady Grey Drive wall. So for those that are not familiar with it, we have the Lady Grey Drive that goes along the Ottawa River. Beautiful 600-meter wall, retaining wall. It was built in 1910, so again, 110 years ago, and it's falling apart. There's no way around it. We have to replace it. So we're not just going to replace it. We're going to make sure, from a historic perspective, the patrimoine and the heritage of it is maintained. But as we do so, we also want to make sure that we up our game a little bit. So the road on top of it is going to become a promenade. We want that to attract people there, and it's going to become a space for people to live, for people to go and enjoy that connection to the river. We have the Rideau Canal Lighting System Rehabilitation, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Again, there's a health and safety concern. The lights are out. The system is aging, and it's not providing the right light. So we're redoing all that. Again, starting this summer. It's going to be done in the next 2 years, but it's going to bring back that vibe that we need along that World Heritage Site. The Kewiki Point happening, so we don't see it from here. We see it better from across the street in our offices. But that point, as it's being developed right now, is to create a lively and welcoming 21st century park. We're bringing universal accessibility to it, interpretation, landscaping, connection with the river, and again, it's one of the best views that you can have in Ottawa, and we're bringing that back so people can go there, connect with the river, connect with its heritage and our values. So beautiful site again. The Westboro Beach redevelopment. So a lot of people are closely connected to that site. So it's a new site, will include many improvements such as zero carbon pavilion with a restaurant and a community space, a rehabilitated heritage structure featuring modern, accessible, gender-neutral washroom, a riverfront lookout with interpretative content about the history and the site. So it'll be universally accessible, and you're going to have access to the water. So again, a great site. And the last one I want to mention is the NCC River House that we are revitalizing. Again, almost 100-year-old building. For those that haven't seen it, it's on the water. We have a footbridge going to it, and we're going to bring a restaurant to it. We're going to have, or I guess there's going to be a food and beverage service to it. But you're going to be able to be part of that river, enjoy the waterfront. And again, it's creating living space, hopefully to revitalize the economy in those nodes and bring people to the waterfront. So great projects that we have. We have many of them. For those that were looking at the board presentations that we had last week, we mentioned a few more. The list is long, but those are major capital projects that we're investing in. And again, working with many of the partners here in the room. So as the principal steward of federal lands with some of the most spectacular built and natural assets in the National Capital Region, I would like to thank all the members and stakeholders of the OBT for truly being a value-added partner with the NCC. So now, without further ado, I am pleased to present the next session, Driving Growth. We all know the importance of having a well-designed plan and working together to achieve the desired results. The City of Ottawa Economic Redevelopment team has been engaging with experts, stakeholders, and the public to craft the next economic development strategy for our city. In this session, you will learn about the key findings that will form the basic for our new economic development strategy. Following that, we will host a panel of key economic partners to discuss the new strategy and how it is aligned with the strategies of both Invest Ottawa and Ottawa Tourism. Finally, you will have a chance to ask questions So please welcome to the stage to present the city findings, Sheila Dorothy, Program Manager, High Economic Impact Projects from the City of Ottawa.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you, Simon. I'm pleased to be here today, there it's up, to share the preliminary findings of the City of Ottawa's economic development strategy for this term of council. So before I get into the key findings, I want to spend a little bit of time providing some context and background. So first, what exactly is an economic development strategy? Well, it's a focused framework that sets the stage for economic growth and prosperity and directs economic development efforts. It's also a roadmap that helps prioritize and guide the city's investment in economic development. And this includes building on well-established programs, projects, and partnerships, as well as introducing new actions and initiatives. It also includes defining the city's role within the larger economic development ecosystem. And depending on the role at hand, that can be one of leader, facilitator, collaborator, supporter, or advocate. So economic development strategies are typically updated every 4 to 5 years to correspond with the term of council. So last term of council, the timing of the strategy was impacted by the pandemic. So instead of a planned update to our strategy, we shifted focus to develop and implement an economic recovery and rebound program with our partners. Now, 3 years later, with a vastly different world and a post-pandemic economy, and of course a new term of council, the development of a new strategy is more timely than ever. So as I move through some of the key findings from our work, you will see that while Ottawa's strengths and competitive economy has brought with it a new set of challenges and opportunities. We began the development process for the new strategies with consultants Ernst & Young mid last year, and we will be bringing it forward for council approval and consideration in Q3 of this year. So the first part of the development of the strategy was setting up some guiding principles. So there are 8 guiding principles, as you can see here on the screen. They have served as the foundation for the strategy's development and equally important, provided the local context. Not surprisingly, the principles include talent and innovation, as well as growth and diversification. So the focus here is really on developing, maintaining Ottawa as an attractive destination for talent and innovation, as well as fostering a supportive environment for our knowledge-based industries and tourism and creative industries. These guiding principles also include elements that make Ottawa unique. The first is that we are a bilingual city, so 1 city, 2 languages, and ensuring that this competitive advantage positions our francophone and bilingual businesses for success. The second is our unique geography. So Ottawa has a mix of urban and suburban areas, along with one of the largest rural components in Canada. And a fun fact, or a fact, is that the geographic areas of the cities of Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal all fit within Ottawa's boundaries. This, along with the Ville de Gatineau to the north, and our proximity to larger metropolitan areas like Toronto and Montreal, come with a unique set of opportunities that set Ottawa apart. The next principle is diversity, equity, and inclusion. The deliberate emphasis on this principle supports a proactive approach to inclusive economic development, one that seeks to remove barriers for Indigenous, and racialized businesses, as well as immigrants. We also wanted to make sure the implications of environmental sustainability and climate change were a lens incorporated into the strategy, as well as the need to be resilient and prepared for future economic uncertainty like the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, we wanted to ensure that partnerships and collaboration are a key foundation throughout the development of the strategy, and not just as it relates to partners in Ottawa, but also partners in the larger economic region of Ottawa-Gatineau. So, once we had the guiding principles in place, we started our work with Ernst & Young. So this work is taking place in 3 phases. So the first phase that we undertook is an economic and trend analysis. This provided a detailed assessment of Ottawa's economy, including current state, competitive advantages, expected opportunities and challenges, as well as post-pandemic implications. Once this phase was complete, we moved on to stakeholder engagement, which we completed earlier this year. It is during this phase that we went out to our partners, stakeholders, and the broader business community to contextualize, validate, and prioritize economic challenges and opportunities. We also sought ideas for actions and initiatives to address these opportunities. Just gonna take a sip of water here. Engagement was completed through interviews and group workshops, as well as an online survey. We're now in the final part of strategy development, and in this phase, we're taking all our findings from phase 1 and phase 2 and working to consolidate and analyze all our findings, which will weave into a meaningful strategy that will go forward to council later this year. So, here are our key findings. So, through our engagement, we heard a lot of reoccurring challenges and opportunities and strengths. So, we've grouped all of these into themes. As I walk you through the themes, please keep in mind this is what we've learned and this is what we've heard. It's not the final strategy. As I mentioned earlier, that strategy will go forward to council in Q3. So the first theme we heard is city building projects. This came through as a high priority through our engagement efforts. This is because city building projects are seen as big-scale opportunities that enable broad-based economic activity and are important to long-term economic growth, cultural vibrancy, and tourism. They are also a critical component to Ottawa's quality of life and the attraction and retention of talent, students, and visitors. There is an opportunity and an appetite for diverse and transformational type city building projects that provide a differentiator for Ottawa. There is also an opportunity for the city to proactively work with our partners and support and facilitate the identification of these types of projects through timely completion. Not surprisingly, and I know this was a theme earlier today, but downtown and the Byward Market. So obviously we know that the pandemic came with rapid structural changes to the nature of work, the visitor economy, and social economic conditions. And for Ottawa's downtown and the Byward Market, this has resulted in a number of challenges that include decreased foot traffic, low levels of economic activity, and safety concerns. So as we talked earlier, hybrid models are here to stay, and the lasting impact of COVID-19, a conscious review of the fabric downtown has been top of mind for cities around the world. For Ottawa, this is really seen as an opportunity for our economic partners to work together to reimagine and revitalize downtown, to increase economic growth and resiliency, but also to enhance our livability, safety, cultural vibrancy, tourism, and placemaking. And to do this, and we've solicited many, many ideas, this will include the consideration of real estate and land use diversification and support for office to residential conversion. It'll also include supporting city building projects and festivals and events downtown. Equally important, it will include advancing the Byward Market and Spark Street public realm plans, as well as marketing efforts to attract activity downtown. And lastly, as you may have heard over the past few days, we are bringing forward a nightlife action plan to council next week. The implementation of this plan will help bring more vibrancy downtown outside of regular business hours. The next theme is talent. This theme is focused on attracting, retaining, and developing talent to meet Ottawa's current and future workforce needs. As we know, talent is a key strength for Ottawa, with approximately 65% of our residents holding post-secondary degrees or equivalent. Nonetheless, we know that an aging workforce, the impacts of the pandemic, and a competitive labor market have meant that employers across all sectors are facing challenges in the recruitment and retention of talent. While the tourism sector continues to rebound, the tight labor market will continue to strain activity and growth. For Ottawa's knowledge-based businesses, which account for over 14,000 businesses, access to skilled talent is essential to the sector's growth and continued success. While there are several organizations in Ottawa engaged in the talent space, We heard that there is a strong need to coordinate and collaborate on talent-related efforts. This means providing tools and resources to proactively communicate the city's diverse employment and study opportunities, as well as Ottawa's quality of life, excellent quality of life, our relative affordability, and other advantages so that we don't lose talent to other cities like Toronto and Montreal. This also means working with our post-secondary institutions on things like student attraction, co-op, and postgraduate retention. And lastly, it highlights the importance of proactively attracting immigration and foreign talent to fill some of our skills gaps. Over the next several years, Ottawa's population will largely be driven by immigration. This highlights the opportunity for us to all work together to ensure Ottawa is seen as an attractive and welcoming destination for newcomers. The next theme we heard about is branding. And this theme is really about advancing the work that Ottawa Tourism has done on Ottawa's Place DNA and work to continue growing Ottawa's reputation and attracting and retaining investment, talent, students, immigrants, and visitors. We all know that one of Ottawa's brand challenges is that we are just seen as a government town. So what we want to do with this theme is ensure that we are including the diversity of economic, cultural, and community activity in the brand, and building an inclusivity lens, to ensure Ottawa's aspiration of place, people, and bilingual identity are consistently represented. The next theme is business and sector support. So this is probably the most multifaceted of all our teams, but the focus here is on supporting new and existing businesses, entrepreneurs, as well as our knowledge-based and creative and tourism sectors. So the city has many well-established partners in this area, and they include Invest Ottawa, Ottawa Tourism, our BIAs, the Ottawa Film Office, and the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition. For this theme, we received a multitude of different ideas for actions and programs, and they range everything from the city providing proof of concept and real-life testing environments for entrepreneurs to a one-stop shop for small businesses. We also know that there are several sectors that present opportunity for Ottawa and Ottawa's knowledge-based businesses, such as defense and life sciences, due to our proximity to regulators and our strong tech sector. The next theme is transportation and connectivity. So this theme is really about enhancing access to and from Ottawa and other destinations to increase economic opportunity and provide the necessary assets to further develop tourism. I think the main challenges here that we are all aware of are some of the lack of direct flights to and from Ottawa. So the opportunity here, really from an economic development perspective, is the advocacy for increased air service and high-frequency rail. The final theme is partnerships and collaboration. This theme is really about partnering with our partners, stakeholders, and other levels of government to cultivate economic growth. While the city has many well-established partners responsible for advancing sector's priorities, we heard that there is a clear need for leadership around shaping and communicating the economic priorities for Ottawa and the broader region. There is also a need for us to develop and cultivate new relationships with diverse stakeholders and collaborators. Lastly, and very important, we also heard the need to support and advance the notion of one economic region. So that means working with our partners like La Ville de Gatineau and the NCC. So the next slide just focuses on our next steps. So as I mentioned, we've gone through phase 1 and phase 2. The third phase is really looking at taking all the findings from our themes, what we've learned and what we've heard, and translating them into a meaningful document that will have actions and initiatives to be delivered over the next term of council. And really these actions and initiatives, we're looking for a mix. So some of those that will be practical and tactical, and others that will be aspirational. Following council approval later this year, we'll begin on an implementation plan and will return to council every year with an update. I hope that you have found the key themes resonate with you. I know many of you in this room participated in our consultations, so we thank you for that, and I thank you for your time and attention this morning.
Thank you, Sheila. That was a fantastic presentation, and I want to congratulate you and thank you for your thought leadership during this process and the opportunity to involve the Board of Trade and many others as stakeholders. So we're really excited about the early findings for the strategy, and now we're just going to have a little discussion around that with some of our economic partners. So I'd like to invite to this stage Cindy Van Buskirk, High Economic Impact Projects for the City of Ottawa, Catherine Callery, the Vice President of Destination Development for Ottawa Tourism, and Sonia Shorey, Vice President, Strategy, Marketing, Communications at Invest Ottawa. See how those titles are just rolling off of my tongue now? Yeah, that's right. Oh, no. Thank you. So this is an exciting time. Post-pandemic recovery and building on the work that we have done together. And I have to use this opportunity to say thank you to all three of these leaders on the stage, because over the course of the last 3 years, of course, I was hired the day we declared a global pandemic. So there was a lot, to say there was a steep learning curve would be an understatement. And these three leaders, who are key economic partners in our city, have been so collaborative, so supportive, so committed to our city, and I just want to say thank you to that on behalf of everyone in this room and our city. So this is exciting work that was done at the city, and I said I was going to skip the first question, but I'm just going to quickly start with the first question, just because I said, this last 3 years has really shifted our city, as we've already heard today, but also the economic strategies that we've developed. So I'm going to start with you, Sonia. If you could just sort of capture sort of what was one learning that you've seen organizationally over the last 3 years.
I might bring a few together.
Yeah, sure.
But thank you, Celine. You've been such a champion for our community together with all the partners here. So thank you for this opportunity. I think one of the biggest, most powerful things was the resilience of our community, of our Main Street business, of our tech sector, and the way we came together. Everything is a system. This is my big focus right now. Everything comes together. Every decision we make, every action we take has impacts far beyond the immediate sphere that we're hoping to. So when we saw the Main Street businesses that were shuttered, we saw the tech sector come together with Ecobia, with the Ottawa Board of Trade, with Ottawa Tourism. There was so much collaboration during that difficult time. When you put good people together and you allow them to be creative, wonderful things happen even in the worst of times. And there are so many learnings now that have emerged from that, where we have Main Street businesses that are online. We have a tech sector. Ottawa's a global tech hub. I have to say that when I was listening to the earlier conversation, I'm like, the tech sector has such a critical role to play in helping our Main Street business and helping our community in that revitalization. If we take a system view, we're speedy, we're agile, we're resilient and flexible, and we apply the lessons learned, I believe we will create the Ottawa of the future that we all desire.
Thank you. Cindy?
I have to echo what Sonia said about what you've brought to the table over the last 3 years. It's been amazing working with you. It's a bit of a love fest up here with all of us ladies this morning. So I will also echo what Sonia said about one of the best things that came out of a really bad time during the pandemic was that collaboration that happened. Our former mayor, Jim Watson, convened the Mayor's Economic Partners Task Force in March of 2020 and brought together the senior leaders from key economic development organizations across the city, really to provide a forum to table issues, to get a pulse check on what was happening on the ground across the city during the pandemic, and to seek advice from subject matter experts on how the city and each other could best support mitigation efforts and really help us get through. So the real win coming out of that was the understanding and partnerships that grew between the organizations. While we were all collegial collaborators pre-pandemic, the needle has definitely been moved, and the opportunity going forward is to continue to seek out those opportunities. It was easy when the government was handing out money on Digital Main Street for Invest Ottawa and Ecobia to come together around a really great program to support our main streets and small businesses. But how do we keep that momentum going over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years as we start to tackle this new economic development strategy and all the other opportunities that are in front of us?
I really believe that that could be our competitive edge here in Ottawa, is our ability to work together, not unlike what the mayor said this morning about that, the people in this room, all of us working together, that could be the key. Catherine, what was your main learning through the last 3 years?
Well, for tourism, it was our equivalent of a rapid unscheduled disassembly, wasn't it? The last 3 years, anyone who's been watching SpaceX. No, but seriously, it was our George Bailey moment. It was that moment where we got to see what it would be like from A Wonderful Life, what it would be like without tourism. What is life without tourism? And that was a real, difficult few years for many tourism businesses, but also for Ottawa in general, because tourism is so interwoven into the fabric of this city. And so, obviously the city lost, billions in visitor spending over the last 3 years, and we had to really roll up our sleeves to support businesses and support them from, to allow them to survive. The cool thing was to see residents also rallying behind tourism experiences. So when the visitors were not coming, we were seeing this incredible resurgence of residents who were exploring their own backyards because they couldn't explore other backyards. And they got to get a sense of the amazing tourism landscape that we have here in Ottawa. And so we also did some inward thinking at Ottawa Tourism, and that was really the nexus of our destination stewardship plan, and looking at taking it from, what's good for residents is going to be good for visitors, because if you have a city that residents are really bought into and are really passionate about, and the experiences that are here in the city, that's going to translate to a great visitor experience, because it's all about personal relationships and interconnection. So that brought about our destination stewardship plan. We won't get into that now because I know we're going to do that in the questions to come, but our learnings were tourism is interwoven into everything that the city is made up of. Many businesses got to realize that they were actually in tourism when they didn't realize maybe before that they were. And what's good for residents is good for visitors. And so that was a really key moment for us.
Thank you. We'll stick with you, Catherine. I know that you have done, I know both you at Ottawa Tourism and Invest Ottawa have also been working on new strategic plans. So maybe you could just share a bit about the highlights of your plan and describe a bit about how these could support the city priorities.
Yeah, a lot of what Shayla was talking about earlier really resonated when I was watching that, the priorities. A lot of them map very well onto the destination stewardship plan things, and I know that wasn't an accident. Thank you, Cindy and team at the City of Ottawa. It actually works out very well that we've just done a destination stewardship plan that we can leverage for other strategies, for our own strategy organizationally, but for the city's planning. Invest Ottawa was also involved in our destination stewardship plan. The idea behind this, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, is a plan for the whole, for all of our community, not just an Ottawa tourism plan, but plan for all of our community to create an Ottawa that is attractive to visitors, to investors, to business, to residents themselves, because tourism is about quality of life too. And we can't do that in a vacuum. We can't do that. It's not an Ottawa tourism problem, because we don't own the assets that we're promoting in tourism. All of you own those assets. So we need you in order to create the strength of the asset that we can then turn around and promote into our various markets. So that was the nexus of the Destination Stewardship Plan. We've got a plan now with over 130 recommendations and actions that we can take, and they're not all Ottawa tourism actions. Some of them are going to be led by Invest Ottawa, some of them are going to be led by the city, and some by private sector. So we can now keep track on how we're tracking. It's a 10-year roadmap. And you know, when I think about the things that the city is doing, inserting the tourism voice into all of the elements, our major infrastructure projects, when I see the city building pieces, the infrastructure projects ahead of us, things like, well, we all have family or friends or relatives that are in organized sport, and all of those organized sports have tournaments. And do we have, you know, infrastructure, for example, that can compete at the highest level to bring in those sporting tournaments to our city, building that kind of thing and that lens into the economic development plan is really key, because it becomes then an infrastructure piece that isn't uniquely a community asset, something that's nice for our city to have and our residents to have, but something that we can then turn around and put out to the world. It's Tourism Week, actually. I don't know if you know this, but one of the key messages is that tourism is Canada's #1 service export industry. And this allows, you know, having that lens on everything that we do allows us to then turn around and create a service export that is Ottawa to the world and bring those people in.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your leadership. I've always appreciated the role of tourism and economic development throughout my career, but this last 3 years was a real lesson about how many aspects of our lives are affected by tourism and our ability to have the visitor economy grow, not just as the sort of direct relief on our tax base, but also how it opens the door to every other form of economic development. So we're grateful for your leadership in that space. Sonia, how is the work going with the Invest Ottawa strategic plan?
So it's been a very exciting time, and just to do a little bit of a level set, I always like to just explain a little bit about who and what Invest Ottawa is. I anticipate most people in this room know that we are the lead economic development agency for knowledge-based industries in the capital, very committed and dedicated to so many of the shared goals you hear about on the stage, about job creation, investment attraction, and economic prosperity in an inclusive world for all. We do 5 key things, and this is where some people just aren't aware of all the different activities and mission mandate we undertake. We help companies both in Main Street and in the tech sector launch, grow, and thrive. Fantastic entrepreneurs. We do nothing in isolation, by the way. We do everything in collaboration with the partners on this stage, with Ecobia, with the Capital Angel Network, and so many other partners. So entrepreneurship. We have a global expansion team that's dedicated to attracting investment, talent, and companies in from around the world, specifically Europe, the Asia Pacific market, and the Americas. We have a talent team that works closely with a multitude of partners, and talent is a huge area of focus in our strategic plan about how we look at developing, attracting, and retaining the right type of talent with a very big focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's everything from collaborating with our amazing post-secondary institutions to our Main Street businesses on some of the challenges they're facing, and certainly the tech sector, where we see huge potential for job opportunities and creation. We have Bayview Yards, which is Ottawa's innovation shop, one-stop business acceleration shop, where I say birds of an innovation feather flock together. So we love bringing everyone together to look at challenges, opportunities, how we can collaborate, and those serendipitous connections that often lead to opportunities we never predicted. And then the big outlier is AreaX.0, our R&D complex for next-gen smart mobility, autonomy, and connectivity. And this was launched during the pandemic, so it really speaks to that principle of collaboration. We had all 3 levels of government, and the City of Ottawa is an absolutely critical partner, so kudos and thank you for your leadership and your commitment. We had 5 multinationals, Ericsson, Nokia, BlackBerry, QNX, Microsoft, and Accenture, our post-secondary institutions, and all kinds of other collaborators coming together to serve SMEs, entrepreneurs, researchers, and multinationals to advance technologies of the future in smart mobility, autonomy, and connectivity. You just heard transportation as one of the key areas that the city is going to be addressing. We have an opportunity. We are the region in North America with the highest concentration of tech talent in the continent. That's ahead of Silicon Valley. That's a huge advantage. If we can harness that together with our small business, with a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, imagine what we can do with technology for good, opportunity to create a more equitable world, a net zero environment, the opportunity to showcase to the world how collaboration can drive economic development and prosperity for all, not just some. So I'm sharing this because this is really the foundation of our strategic plan refresh. When Michael Tremblay and our team came together in 2017, I think we consulted maybe 2,500 people across the city and got incredible insight that we really tried to put to work. And it's iterative. You always evolve as over time as new situations, pandemics arise, convoys come up. But the opportunity to do a refresh and to build on what we've learned and try and put that into practice. We consulted many people in this room. We've worked together with City on their strat plan, with Ottawa Tourism and vice versa. And really we're looking at some of the moonshots, right? Where can we lead the world? So I believe in communities and grassroots coming together to create that commitment and that bond. The piece that I would like to add is if we can think big, and that's really what we're trying to help our community do, is pulling on all the strengths we have to offer, the technology powerhouse, the entrepreneurial spirit, the Main Street businesses that are the heart of our communities, and we pull that together in really big ideas and big ways. I really do believe we can take on the world. So we're looking at areas of moonshot around Area X.0 and how it's serving innovation in a diverse array of sectors, not just transportation. We have a 100-acre smart farm with the support of the city that's leading the way in terms of ag tech innovations that are allowing producers to use less water, less resources, have less negative environmental impact while increasing their yield and their profitability. That's huge. Food sustainability is a major issue. Public safety and security, defense, look at the role that's playing in our world today. Cybersecurity. There are so many ways that we can harness all of the collaborators at Area X.0. And if we attract more companies, we attract more business, we're going to drive more business to our Main Street, and we're going to create more opportunity to attract all kinds of new talent from around the world into our community. So really, we're focused on operational efficiency and productivity, those moonshots and how we drive strategic market opportunity for Ottawa in areas where we can be first movers, put tech to work to drive good back into the community, and of course talent. And that was a really big focus in Shayla's presentation. Only 5% of immigrants that land in Canada come to Ottawa first. That's a problem, and that's something that we want to work with all of our partners to address. We have incredible international student talent at our post-secondaries. How do we keep them here? How do we create those linkages and opportunities, not just through the communities and the main streets that they're living in, but the job opportunities, not to be employee number 8 zillion and one by going off to the valley, but by leading in some of the great entrepreneurial companies that are coming up behind Rewind, NAC, Noibu, The Grocer. These are companies, many of whom are building a triple bottom line. So not just building a great commercial business, building a better world, building a better society, building a better environment. That's happening here. So there's so many advantages. Our strat plan is really looking at those areas of focus and how we work with partners better. I can't emphasize this enough. So all the partners on this stage, many of the partners out here, we do nothing in isolation. We certainly can't do it alone, and we don't have all the answers. We need this entire ecosystem to collaborate with us and find those right ways to bring your vision, mission, mandate to bear as part of a collective that allows us to go after that big vision, those big moonshots that's going to have value and impact through every community in the city.
Thank you, Sonia. I don't even know what to say.
We need to stand up and applaud every
No,
time.
I know. I feel like that too.
Sonia
Every time she speaks.
There is, well, Michael Tremblay is awesome, but frankly, there's no better representative of Invest Ottawa or what you bring to this collective table than you. So
Yeah,
thank
Sonia, thank you. I agree, Cindy. I just want, I love that term, triple bottom line. I love it. And so thank you for harnessing such a growing sector for the good of the whole community. And I know one of Michael's favorite sayings is the world needs more Ottawa. And so I think that we have a lot of opportunities there, but on many, many fronts. And I'm not going to miss this opportunity. Thank you for the leadership that you've demonstrated for advancing women in our city as well. So thank you for that. Now, all of this requires a tremendous amount of collaboration, alignment. We've already said that that's there's a possibility for us to use that as our competitive edge. That's challenging, though. It's challenging to keep that momentum going. We had no choice these last 3 years. We were thrown in a room together every 5 minutes to address a new crisis. How do we keep that momentum going? Cindy, I'm going to go to you first, just so you know. How do we keep that momentum going? How do we execute on some of these things and make sure that we're optimizing our collective resources?
All great questions. Yep. The first thing I would say is that really economic growth and prosperity are really big concepts. And most people in this room are thinking about how can I leverage an opportunity today to drive revenue to my business tomorrow. And that's because you're business people and that matters. You have employees, you have families. The city takes, however, a broader view of growth and prosperity and what it's going to take to achieve that. And one thing that we have learned and one thing we know for sure is that we are definitely not going to do it alone because we need the partners and expertise to drive the development and the implementation of a vision that speaks to three things: shared priorities, shared values, and a belief that everyone in our community should have equal access to economic opportunity. So that shared purpose, advocacy, and collaboration that developed over the pandemic really just, frankly, needs to continue. We can't now retreat to our prospective corners now that the worst of it is over and continue, empire building or doing what we do as organizations and businesses in that broader economic development ecosystem. So organizations like the ones on the stage and the ones in this room will be responsible to continue to communicate their priorities to their stakeholders and to each other. And the city will continue to do what we do best, which is try to create that overarching roadmap so that we're all pulling in the same direction and continue to facilitate opportunities to bring partners together around a shared purpose.
Thank you. Catherine, what would you say would be the one thing we should be focused on to keep the alignment there?
Yeah, I think I'll preface what I'm saying by, I love what you just said about the triple bottom line and what you've just said as well about kind of thinking, pulling back and thinking from a 30,000-foot perspective almost. But we often talk about economic development as somehow separate from civic development or social, and cultural and social good. And I think we have to stop thinking of these things in silos. We have to start thinking about that. If you know the triple bottom line kind of Venn diagram of planet and then people and then prosperity, inward circles, they're all dependent on each other, and they're all part of that. Of economic development. They're each part of each other. So I think we have to kind of stop thinking about economic development in a silo somehow. And we definitely at Ottawa Tourism, I want to give a shout out to my Ottawa Tourism table right there. Thanks for being here. And this, this big showing of Ottawa Tourism is kind of a testament to this. Is when we're talking about city building, yes, it's about finding prosperity for our community, but it's about quality of life. It's about bringing everyone along for the ride and tackling bigger problems as well. We saw in Shayla's presentation that there are social issues that have to be tackled, and those will impact bringing in tech talent. Those will impact visitors as well. So all of this is interwoven. It's all kind of a part of the fabric, and we have to start thinking that way. So as far as keeping the alignment going, I think what we've seen right now is that we've all taken advantage on working with each other's plans and kind of building that into strategic plans going forward. And I hear what Mary Rose said earlier about, it's about the grassroots and you can't wait for a big plan to come along. I hear that. I see your token, but I raise you because it's not just about that. You have to have, the grassroots is part of it, but things don't happen without a plan. And if we don't take each other's plans and weave them into our strategic planning and what we do day to day, it's just not going to happen. So the fact that we're doing this right now, Ottawa Tourism has taken the Destination Stewardship Plan and synthesized what it is that Ottawa Tourism can tackle that is an Ottawa Tourism thing. And we're going to work on that on our next 5-year strategic plan. And we know that the pieces that Invest Ottawa feels that it can tackle that are part of that Destination Stewardship Plan are already in Sonia's plan. So as we do that, and as we kind of include our planning in our overall processes and stick to our plans, we're going to get there. You know, you have to kind of continue to chart that road as you build it out. And yes, the grassroots is going to be a critical part of that as well. And you want to make it a little easier to do unusual things. And all of those things are great concepts around city building, but it has to be multiple approaches, and the planning is a part of it.
I agree. 100%. And I think Mary meant to say that too, but not to leave the grassroots behind, but 100% we need a plan. Sonia, one thing that we can do to keep the alignment strong?
I think that shared vision where every individual, team, organization, and community can see themselves and has an opportunity to contribute in a meaningful way that builds on their individual vision, mission, and mandate and contribute to something bigger that's powerful, where they see a real impact, where they can see their individual contribution and the outcomes that we're achieving. I think that would be very powerful, and that requires continued communication, collaboration, and understanding that we're never going to get everything right from the get-go, that we're always going to need to take the learnings, pivot, apply them, take more feedback, get that diverse perspective that adds so much competitiveness. If we can commit to those guiding principles and have something where everyone sees themselves, we're going to get that critical mass action. And I honestly believe that's one of the big differentiators in terms of actually driving prosperity. If you have everyone rowing the boat together, even if they're bringing something different to the table, and they always will, it's like a meal that gets made. When we sit down to dinner, there's many parts of the meal. Everyone has something to contribute. And I think one of the things that will help us get there, the relationships that were built through all of these collaborations. So I'm looking at this line of panelists. I'm looking out, at Michelle and the team at Ecobia, and Jennifer Francis is here from Capital Angel, I think. These are people that relationships have gotten so strong over the last 3 years. I can see us coming together on holiday weekends, building out the plan for the Downtown Ottawa Business Relief Fund. That, by the way, was launched in a ridiculously rapid amount of time. The Digital Main Street program, which was assembled in something like 3 or 4 weeks, that engaged every single person on this stage and so many other partners. They were formed by blood, sweat, and tears over all kinds of hours outside of the normal business workday. Like, when you come through the trenches with people, you never forget, and you're there for each other. And I see this as the seeds that we can build on and help others to inspire more of that same behavior. There is strength in this ecosystem now that was not here 3 years ago. No one would choose to go through the pandemic, don't get me wrong, but good things came out of it.
There is strength that came from it, and I often say this, that we learned a lot of lessons through the pandemic that we can leverage for the future, and one was to prioritize progress over perfection. We saw people turn stuff around, all of you included, and every level of government, that they would never otherwise have contemplated being able to do. So we can use that to be more action focused, because I think that there is an urgency to where we are in Ottawa right now and what we have in front of us in terms of opportunities. So if we use that as a foundation, the ability to work together, I think we'll get there. We're going to maybe take maybe just one time for one question. If we have any questions from the audience for any of our panelists at all. I know they covered it off so well. Where are we? Oh, right, Jennifer. We have Amanda coming. Run, Amanda, run.
Hi, thanks all of you to the great work you're doing. Based on the last presentation we saw about downtown recovery, there are a number of cities that stand out as being the cautionary tale. They're Calgary, Washington, D.C., and San Francisco. And the things that make them similar are an over-reliance on one industry. In San Francisco, it's the tech industry. In Washington, D.C., it's the federal government. We're kind of at a place in Ottawa where we've been relying on both of those sectors. And you can see, the Shopify building, which we can all see from here, was one example of the tech industry was so nimble that within a nanosecond, they were all working from home. So I'm wondering, from all of you who are seeing what's happening on the ground, what is the diversification that's happening that helps us build other industries so that we're not overly dependent on one or two industries?
You want to start, Cindy? And then, okay.
Sure, thanks. I'll start. That's a great question. Government, technology, and tourism have been the three main economic drivers in our city as long as I've been in our city, which is a really, really long time. And, amongst many principles that we've been considering as we're building the new economic development strategy for the city, it's this idea of, economic growth, economic prosperity, economic resilience, but really economic diversification for that very reason. The government has been backstopping our economy for a long time. How in the world of hybrid, where your government job doesn't need to be based in Ottawa anymore, how do we protect our local economy and those dollars that are circulating? Well, the only way we can really do that is through diversification. And I think more emphasis, growing our visitor economy. Tourism is always going to be a key driver, but we need to really focus on growing our visitor economy and all of the assets that really make that possible. We need to be focusing on growing our arts and culture sector, our film production sector. We need to be looking to our mature technology sector and where are those new opportunities, whether that's in defense or life sciences. I think Shayla mentioned earlier, cybersecurity, those sorts of things. I'm not a subject matter expert in that space, but we need to be targeted, specific, and go get it. We did it with technology. Yes, it was a little organic, but there were a lot of smart people that did a lot of great work decades ago to deliver us to where we are today. Let's get those people in a room, let's identify those opportunities, and let's just go get them.
Just want to add to what Cindy just said, and you pull together so many elements of diversification that I think we should as a community really dive into. On the tourism side, tourism is a vehicle for cultural expression, right? So in Shayla's plan, I saw the focus on inclusivity and diversity. In our destination stewardship plan, a big component of that is truth and reconciliation. You think about one of our other key pillars is terroir and loving the land and kind of culinary experiences. But I think about all of these things, and they offer different opportunities to have connection points into different cultural elements of the city and what makes the city tick. The people, all of those types of things, animation. So I think that is a really key piece as well as diversifying to these other industries. I know our film commissioner is here, Sandrine. So Cindy gave a shout out to the film industry. That's another big piece as well. All of these things, I think about Stephen Willis's graph that he had up with the cities that are recovering in terms of the downtown traffic. And Ottawa was in there on the second column, if you remember, and we were kind of 2/3 toward the bottom. And in his optimism, Stephen said, well, we're not the bottom of the list. We're in there. We're in the mix toward the bottom. But I looked at it and I thought, yeah, the only other Canadian city that is lower on this list than Ottawa is Winnipeg. So we aren't, we need to get our heads around getting people back into our downtown. We absolutely need to do our part on that. There are businesses that depend on foot traffic and people being downtown. And so things like animation, to your point, Jennifer, and diversifying and finding ways and reasons for people to be downtown that aren't anchored on government and aren't anchored on working are going to be really key.
I'm really passionate about the convergence of scientific disciplines, sectors, and technologies, and how those solutions can come forward and target a multitude of markets. So I'm thinking about it a little bit differently because we have a lot of strengths in different sectors, from life science and biotech to defense to security, ICT. There's a really strong array of different clusters where technology and business, we're powerhouses, and we've got huge opportunity in terms of the talent that we employ. If I look at 5G, Ericsson and Nokia, major employers. 90% of the industrial telecommunications R&D in this country takes place as headquartered here out of Ottawa. And that has an opportunity in a multitude of other sectors. And I'm seeing a lot of collaborations that are allowing those new solutions to come forward, and who's developing those new solutions and who they're benefiting being one of the biggest differentiators, supporting the diversification messaging that you've just heard here.
Thank you, Sonia. Fantastic. Can we have a round of applause for these leaders?
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
I'm Derek Fage, and I encourage you to join me each and every weekday at 2 p.m. for an edition of Daytime Ottawa. We will share with you some fabulous stories, inspirational stories, and of course, recipes from local chefs. We'll tell you about some wonderful musical performances, introduce you to local businesses and charities, and so much more. Join us here on Daytime Ottawa at 2 p.m. weekdays with repeats at 6 and 11 p.m.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.
And the format for session 3 will be 3 components: a short presentation, a quick panel, and then a Q&A to you. Will lead up to lunch, which I'm now estimating will be around 12:20. So we're leading up to lunch. After lunch, we'll hear from our keynote and finish the day with a great big bang talking about high-impact economic projects. There are many great companies that line up to support today's event and make this possible. One of them is the Regional Group, which of course is a leader in real estate in the National Capital Region. Really is a remarkable company working in different facets of the real estate. I want to point out that Senator Gordon and Tal Scheer, where are you guys? I was just chatting with you in back. There you are right there. So thank you very much for supporting today's event. And I'd now like to invite to the podium Sachin Anand, the Senior Director of Acquisitions at Regional Group, to say a few words about the company and introduce our next panel. Here is Sachin Anand.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, and thank you for having me here today at the City Building Summit. As Michael mentioned, my name is Sachin Anand, and I am the Senior Director of Acquisitions at Regional Group. Regional Group is a private, family-owned, vertically integrated real estate investment, development, and management firm focused in and around the Greater Ottawa and Gatineau region. Established in 1958, 65 years and into its 3rd generation at the helm, Regional Group has grown into one of the most recognized and respected real estate platforms with over 250 employees, and an extensive network of public and private sector relationships. We have a gross development pipeline of over $5 billion in projects in various stages of development across Ontario, Quebec, including commercial, residential, and mixed use. The company's service platform is managed by a team of industry leaders with demonstrated experience in land, housing through EQ Homes, commercial and multifamily development, in-house leasing, asset and property management, construction management, and tax and valuation advisory services. It truly is a full spectrum of services. Regional's home building division, EQ Homes, consistently creates visionary, award-winning communities which lead the way in home innovation and sustainable living initiatives. While being born and raised in Ottawa, I had the opportunity to live in different cities around the world for both part of my work and university careers. I attended McGill University in Montreal. I studied abroad at business school in France. I worked in investment banking in my initial years in London, England, and Manhattan, New York in investment banking. I love to travel have been to over 40 countries. I'm not embellishing when I say this. Ottawa offers one of the world's best, well-rounded quality of life I've seen around the world. It was reasons like affordable home ownership, access to employment, access and cost of healthcare, transit and commuting options, family life balance that brought me and my wife back to Ottawa. Not to mention we are relatively spoiled with plentiful fitness and outdoor options, whether you're a skier, a golfer, a camper, any direction, north, south, west, east, you can get it in pretty much 30 minutes. I've known Regional Group and EQ Homes since my return to Canada in 2009. They were a client of mine for over 14 years as a commercial lender here in Ottawa. They have always been master planners and have a long-term holistic view on their developments. They create a true sense of community. There's a heavy focus on mixed-use communities where you could live, work, and play. Our developments garner a lot of thought into how we create community engagement through development of a community concept that includes many housing options, transit options, access to schools, access to healthcare, seniors and long-term care, spaces to congregate, such as rooftop patios, lobbies, working space in your condo, as well as proximity to city parks, green space, blue space being water, recreational facilities, gyms, and city facilities, as well as day-to-day amenities such as retail and employment. I think I've got the clicker here. All right, so this is an example of two master plan communities that I wanted to present. The first one being Greystone, which is a brownfield infill on Main Street next to St. Paul's University. We're, I think, year 10 into this. But you get an example of the many components that are in here, talking about different housing options, condos, apartments, single-family homes, towns, long-term care facilities. So there's a good mix of options for people to age in place and not have to leave a community once they've built a sense in that community. The second one is something I found rather unique when I came across Regional, was master planned industrial and employment parks. This is a 170-acre master planned employment park that's now home to Amazon, Costco, Tomlinson headquarters, as well as car dealerships. It's an auto park, and then there's retail amenities to suit. It's not done, and there's more to come in this site. Can I somehow go back? There we go. So quite simply, our development philosophy relates quite strongly to community and quality of life. Our legacy is your future. That's kind of the motto between how we approach our developments and our long-term view on the communities we're creating. On behalf of Regional Group, we are proud to be a sponsor of this year's City Building Summit. A key emerging trend post-pandemic highlights what cities can do to protect and enhance quality of life as a key economic driver. Attracting families, investment in talent is based on affordability, access to housing, quality transit, and commitment to healthy outcomes. These elements of community prosperity continue to evolve. Our next session invites experts on these matters and where we were and where we should be going to build an inclusive and sustainable community. Please welcome Dr. Vera Etches, Medical Officer of Health, Ottawa Public Health, Katie Burkholder-Harris, Executive Director of Alliance to End Homelessness, Jason Burgraff, Executive Director, Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, and Jennifer Armstrong, Program Manager, Transportation Policy and Network. And to moderate this panel, please welcome back Michael.
All right, welcome to our panelists. And Jason, I'm going to pull you right up to the podium here. Is that where you'd like to present from? Yes? Probably. Okay, so here is Jason Burgraff.
Well, that was quick. All right. You have a few slides. So yeah, I'm just going to kick right into it. I don't expect you to see this graphic all that well. What it does lay out, though, is kind of the segments when we talk about a housing continuum. And Katie knows this very well. We know we go from emergency shelters to transitional housing to supportive housing to affordable housing to market housing. The reason why I like this particular graphic is Other ones that do sort of the same sort of thing between on the housing continuum separate out rental and home ownership. And it makes it always look, because the way they sequence it, it always makes it look like rental is lesser than home ownership. And for various reasons, which will become apparent as I go through this, there's going to be a lot of talk about rental supply today, or at least from me. So I like this setup because it shows that that should be on an equal footing. And very often when we talk, and even when people talk to me, and so Home Builders Association, they ask, oh, just low-rise homes. I'm like, no, like an apartment is a home. Like people live there, people sleep there. And we often, I want to try to change part of that conversation of the rental being, a legitimate home that we present. And I think that's important for the city moving forward overall. So I often talk about housing supply and the housing deficit, and I get asked, well, what are the real numbers? So Will Dunning, who is a housing economist located in here, I think, actually, went back, looked at our population, our household demographics from 2006 to 2021. And what he said was, overall, we should have built 24,000 more homes than what we did over that 15-year period. I've given out the breakout of ground-oriented homes and higher homes. He actually said there was actually a bit of a surplus demographic-wise on your mid-density stuff. But overall, I think it's really important to say, what's the state of housing right now? We all know that we don't have enough housing. Here is, an actual graphic or an actual, statistics that show what the hard numbers are, and really even 2 years ago what the hard numbers were. So when we're talking about housing supply, we're really starting off on the wrong foot. We've got to catch up a lot on what the housing supply really is there. And it's, it's critical to understand the deficit has been building up over a long amount of time. It's going to take quite an effort to get that, to fulfill that, and fill not only the stuff that's coming in the future, but of course the stuff that we have now. So I talked about rental, and so I want to really focus on that for a moment. And as part of Will's work, he showed, okay, we've built 25,000 new high-density units in the city, but in fact, we should have built 31,000. So it really, again, shows Ottawa's kind of always has a small town mentality, a low-rise mentality, but in fact, it's kind of not, if we want to provide a sufficient amount of housing that we need for our population, it's not where we need to be. And I'm going to elaborate a bit more to the future as I see that going forward. But Will also feels that we need to move, about 25% more housing up on the high density tower side. So why am I talking about supply and quality of life? And the reality is, every segment on my first panel on affordable housing, transitional, rental and home ownership, every single one of those segments has a deficit of supply. And when you have a deficit in any of the segments, the ability to move up and down the continuum, the ability to move to different housing, to move to different parts of the city to chase a job, what have you, everyone becomes stuck. So, even in my own, I live in Orleans. I have a 92-year-old neighbor. She is stuck in her single-family home. She can't leave that home and buy something else because of the high cost of housing, which many of our retirees, many of our empty nesters, people around that sort of age are, am I on the right slide? Yeah. So, many of those people are really, stuck in the housing that they have. So, Mike Moffat, who's going to speak later on, often kind of talks about, hey, if we want to talk about housing for young families and especially for growing families, we should really think about the supply of senior housing and the ideal of having housing that you might not be able to age in your home, but maybe age in your neighborhood instead. And the opportunities that will be there for that that's what we really need to kind of push to in order to free up those single-family homes for the families that need them overall. You can't quite see the rest of it. I think I've pretty much kind of covered the items there. As Katie will probably go into a bit more of the idea of inadequate and unaffordable on the supply side of things. That's kind of the tip when we think about in inefficiency there's not enough supply of housing, on the lower end scale, on the affordable and what have you. We tend to kind of think of it like that, but in fact, we're all kind of getting there. If you're thinking about selling your home, unless you're going to move out into other areas, you're really looking at you're not looking at any windfall for a nest egg for your retirement moving forward. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about a little bit about economic development, making my play to be on a second panel maybe next year. 40,000 jobs, 2.5 million in wages, 5 million in economic activity. Really a key consideration, and you saw this in the Board of Trade's municipal campaign of how important housing supply is to attract and retain talent. People come to Ottawa because of the high quality of life that we have here, but it is very much a factor of our housing supply, of whether that quality of life is there or how much that quality of life costs. And so more and more as the prices go up and we have more demand for housing that we don't have, that opportunity of quality of life in Ottawa becomes a less opportunity for more and more people. I was very lucky that last week the CMHC Housing Supply Report came out. And this is where I'm going to really tie back into rental. If CMHC supply support for Ottawa, 11,000 new housing starts last year. We talk about can we achieve 15,000 for those who know that the municipal housing pledge. You know what, we've grown, we've done 10,000 thereabouts, depending on where you draw the CMA boundaries over the past number of years. You know what, we're starting to do that climb. I really think it is achievable to hit that 15,000 mark. The real thing and reason why I've been kind of focused on rental in this talk so far is this is the first time in over 20 years. Oh, you know what? I'm interrupting myself, but I will give credit to David Salvi. If he's in the room, I stole all these highlights of this summary report from him, from his OBJ article. So please read those articles if you're not already. But first time in 20 odd years that high density housing, apartments, condos, has outsupplied single family homes, which is a great critical mass to see. I hope that we start seeing, if we're going to provide a sufficient amount of housing moving forward for our population, we're going to have to actually see more of that. And I think when you look at what is the future of housing, what is it going to actually look like? How is it going to affect the city? What is the city going to look like in terms of the housing supply? Look at these numbers here, right? 5 stories of apartment buildings going up from 5.1 to 7.3. 10% of projects going up more than 20 stories or more, and then 25% contained more than 100 units, up from 2.8, so double the amount of buildings that had 100 units more. Ottawa is urbanizing on the built form side of things in a way that I don't think many of us, and even myself for sure, we don't conceive Ottawa in that fashion, but that's very much the way Ottawa's going, and frankly, it's the way that Ottawa needs to go. So I mentioned the Ottawa Municipal Housing Pledge. It's 151,000 homes over the next 10 years, roughly 10,000 homes a year. Is it enough homes? Perhaps. Well, as demographics kind of work our way out, we'll kind of see. Ottawa's OP was built on 400,000 homes. Updated forecast from the ministry is 130,000 homes. It's a significant jump in housing demand. And what we're going to see over is a big spillover from where we are providing housing here to people moving out. We already see it, right, to Arempire, Rockland, Kemptville, because of the lack of housing opportunities here. We're going to see that moving forward if we don't address the housing supply that we have. So that's why I like to always kind of reemphasize my last point there, which is, the housing pledge is very necessary in order to focus our efforts on producing 15,000 new homes a year. It's not a nice thing to have. Our housing supply should not be a byproduct or a second thought of everything else. It has to be a corporate goal of the industry, of the city, of all of us as the public, in order to provide the kind of Ottawa that we are enjoying and the kind of Ottawa we feel we need to provide to others moving forward. So, Michael, I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you, That was Jason from the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association. Next up, we talked about homes. Now let's talk about people without homes. Next up is Katie Burkholder-Harris. Here you go, Katie. Podium's yours.
Thank you, and I'm very glad that I don't have slides because basically they'd be the same as some of Jason's. If we are talking about ending homelessness, we are talking about affordable housing. And I want to start by just sharing a little bit about the Alliance. I'm the executive director of the Ottawa Alliance to End Homelessness. We represent 70 different agencies who are all working in the housing homelessness sector in Ottawa. And a lot of our work is advocacy and public engagement based, but increasingly our work is a focus on nonprofit housing. So a key thing to know that I think sometimes we don't all hear or know about from the past, but homelessness is not inevitable and it has not always existed. It's a relatively new phenomenon brought about largely because we stopped building new, affordable, nonprofit housing. Prior to the 1980s, Canada was building about 20,000 units every single year of purpose-built nonprofit rental. But by 1993, the federal government stopped investing in that entirely. While there are many factors that contribute to homelessness, there really is only one single thing that all people who experience homelessness have in common, and that is the lack of a home. While mental illness, trauma, and other challenges can certainly play a role, it's critical to remember that these issues have always existed, but homelessness has not. In Ottawa, almost 7,000 people stay in emergency shelters every single year. This includes 1,100 families who are staying in motels, which is costing us $3,300 a month per family. For people that are stuck in shelter and want to be in our community, they want to be thriving. And I think it's really important to know this is because there are no affordable housing options available, and we didn't get here by accident. Homelessness sits at the extreme end of the housing spectrum that Jason showed you. And I would say on the other end of that is not just home ownership, but it's housing as an investment asset. And those two extremes have created a market that is somewhat warped actually right now. Across the spectrum, people are feeling the pressure of a housing crisis that is out of control and impacting us in big, big ways. In Ottawa, this looks like a one-bedroom apartment that costs $2,000 a month. It looks like full-time university students who are staying in emergency shelters because they can't afford the rent. It looks like people who are working full-time during the day as personal support workers or factory workers and sleeping in a shelter at night. And these are both from direct stories. I don't know if anybody was tuning in at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a personal support worker staying in shelters that was brought forth before the Ontario Tribunal. She was in Ottawa, and she ended up bringing COVID to her home that she was supporting people in. She was homeless, and she was staying in the shelter, but she was working full-time and serving us and our community in a really deep time of need. The housing crisis also looks like people stuck in alternative level of care beds. This costs $30,000 a month per person, and it's because there are no affordable options to go to. And as Jason said, it looks like people who can't downsize in their own neighborhoods because there are simply no affordable options. We've heard that theme a number of times today. The housing crisis also looks like businesses who cannot hire staff because people cannot afford to live in this city. And we've heard this a lot today. It looks like young families who are critical to our city's social and economic growth leaving Ottawa for places with more affordable housing. I don't know how aware folks are about Ontario's out-migration last year. It was the highest it's ever been. A lot of people are leaving because housing is less expensive in other communities. Alberta is poaching our talent. In 2020, economist Sam Bowman wrote an article titled "The Housing Theory of Everything." In it, he cites slow economic growth, poor health, financial instability, income inequality, and even our slowing birth rates, all stemming in some way from a lack of affordable housing. He describes how fixing this one big thing, the housing crisis, can actually fix a whole lot of other seemingly unrelated challenges. In other words, there are no silver bullets to solving our big collective challenges, but affordable housing is about as close as we're going to get. I would go a step further and assert that nonprofit housing must play a larger role if we want to ensure that everyone in our community has a home. For the last 50 years, we've relied predominantly on the private market to resolve the housing crisis. Given the depth of need that we see across the housing spectrum, it's clear that the private market can't resolve this crisis alone, and frankly, we should stop expecting it to. In order to make our city affordable, the smartest investments that we can make with public dollars is in nonprofit housing. It simply means that housing is set apart from the private market. There's no profit motive. It's just about providing a home. Rental costs are tied to income rather than average market rent, ensuring that a household only pays 30% of that income on rent. And while market rents continue to escalate based on what the market can bear, nonprofit housing providers provide affordable stock in perpetuity. This is not about an either or, this is a both and. We need the private sector market, we need the nonprofit market, and they can actually complement each other in a really effective way to meet deep housing need that the private market just can't meet because of the need for profit, understandably. Communities are reducing homelessness. So after I've given you all the bad news, I have some good news. We are actually seeing reductions in homelessness across the country and across the world. Medicine Hat has effectively ended homelessness. Waterloo has virtually eliminated chronic family homelessness. London, Ontario has ended chronic veterans homelessness. And Edmonton, almost the same size as Ottawa, but a little bit larger, has reduced homelessness by 50%. Each of these communities has taken a systems-based approach. Rather than responding to homelessness on a program-by-program basis, they focus on the ecosystem. They have focused on data-driven coordination as critical steps to reducing homelessness. But the gold standard for addressing the housing and homelessness crisis is Finland. While other Western governments have decreased funding for affordable nonprofit housing, Finland has done the opposite. They doubled down on increasing nonprofit housing stock. Now, almost 40 years later, they have virtually eliminated homelessness altogether as a country. We can do this too. This is a moonshot, but it is possible. It requires doing things differently. We need a systems-based approach. We need data-driven service coordination and deep investment in nonprofit housing. Ottawa can be, and I think is, a world-class city, but where everyone can afford to live and thrive. Let's work together to get it done. Thanks.
Another fascinating presentation. Thank you so much, Katie. Next up, I'm going to call Jennifer Armstrong, who's the Program Manager of Transportation Policy and Network at the City of Ottawa. Here's Jennifer.
Okay, excellent. You can't have a transportation planner without some maps to share. So I'm here today to bring a mobility perspective to the quality of life conversation. And I'll start, if I can move ahead here. Maybe not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is an image from a 1965 plan for Ottawa, and it shows downtown Ottawa. You can see it's got a fairly substantial freeway system that's expected between Laurier and Gloucester Street. And I think it really encapsulates how people thought about transportation in the past. This plan also did include rapid transit, but there was certainly a clear focus on cars. And that thinking, how do we build our cities to move cars, persisted for many, many years. And gradually, however, there's been a paradigm shift. And today the focus really isn't on moving cars, but how do we move people? So how do we move people who are biking, who are walking, who are taking transit, or who are driving? And given this paradigm shift, the city responded by starting to invest in active modes of transportation. In 2012, we received Ontario's first ever gold award from the Share the Road Cycling Coalition. And we've started to invest in the cycling network, and it's taken time, but the network is growing. It's getting more connected, and it's expected to become even more connected in the future as we continue to invest. And the interesting thing is that the more we have invested in active modes of transportation, people in the city have had the opportunity to try out these facilities, to use them, and now they're starting to ask for them in their own neighborhoods. So streets that are safe, that they're welcoming, where kids can walk and cycle to school, where there's places to sit, where there's shade, things to see and do. These are really the types of streets that create communities where people want to live. And one of the ways that the city has been accelerating the transition to complete streets, streets that accommodate all modes of transportation, is by the Complete Streets policy. And essentially that policy allows the city to look at each transportation project as an opportunity to make it better. So when there's road reconstruction happening, when there's major transit projects, all of those initiatives can be looked at as an opportunity to provide walking and cycling facilities, to provide shade, and to make it a better place for people who want to spend time. And we do know that it's working. Over the next 25 years or so, we expect to build about 550 kilometers of new cycling infrastructure. And the expectation is about 3/4 of that will be provided as part of other projects. We also know that a convenient, reliable transit system is really essential to quality of life. And there are a lot of people in this city that find transportation to be a barrier to having a job, to buying groceries, to accessing health care. And transit can play a really critical role in addressing mobility poverty within the city. At the same time, transit is absolutely essential to meeting the city's greenhouse gas reduction targets. And it's a much more space-efficient mode of transportation, which means that it fits a lot better into our urban fabric than, say, that 17-lane freeway would have. And the reality is that we just don't have space within our urban area to build those very extensive road projects. And so transit needs to play that foundational role. Now, excuse me, we've already heard about the impact that the pandemic has had on ridership and some of the challenges facing transit in Ottawa today. But amidst all of the negative headlines, I think it's important to remember that Ottawa actually has one of the most successful transit systems in all of North America. Before the pandemic, Ottawa had about 20% of the trips that commuters make to work were made by transit, and that's just behind Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. And if you look at sustainable modes of transportation, so people who walk, cycle, bike, and carpool, Ottawa ranked second in all of Canada, behind only Toronto. We also know from our pre-pandemic data that people traveling from the suburbs to downtown Ottawa use transit. And in fact, over 50% of those trips are made by transit. And in communities like Orleans and Barrhaven, it's closer to 60% of people that use transit to come downtown to work. So we know the world has changed, but there is a strong foundation in transit that Ottawa has to build on. And finally, I just wanted to say a couple of words about innovation in the transportation sector. The city is working with the private sector and others to pursue new innovations in providing mobility services. The challenge that we face is making sure that those new technologies and those innovations support our city building objectives. So do they make our streets safer? Do they support transit? Do they make it easier for people with disabilities to move about our system? So what does the future of transportation look like in Ottawa? Well, we're in the process of updating our transportation master plan, and tomorrow we'll actually be seeking council approval for the transportation policies within that plan. And those policies provide the direction for how the city will build and maintain and operate its transportation system. And the vision really calls for a healthy and an equitable transportation system. So a transportation system where land use and transportation really work together to create complete, inclusive communities where amenities like parks and services are within an easy walk of residents that live there, and where the streets and the sidewalks and the cycling facilities are safe, because we know that those things are really important for promoting physical activity, mental health, social interaction. And this isn't just for new neighborhoods, this also applies equally to existing communities. We also need a resilient and responsive transportation system, resilient to future climate conditions, responsive to all the change that's on the horizon as we recover from the pandemic and we adapt to these new ways of working. And also just as new technologies and mobility services emerge, we need to be nimble, we need to be flexible to respond to that. We also need a transportation system that's sustainable, that minimizes impacts on our environment, and that contributes to meeting our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And we need a system that's affordable, both for the people who use the system, but also for taxpayers. And so that means making smart investments, and it also means being as efficient as we can with the infrastructure that we already have. And finally, I think, I just want to emphasize, I think the key is to provide people with options. Options that are safe, that are reliable, that are convenient, options that leverage the new technologies that are on the horizon. I think in the end, it's these new, putting more of a focus on the options that are available to residents, that's how we can achieve a high quality of life in the city, and that should be the focus and is the focus in our transportation master plan. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Really appreciate that. And now we're going to talk health, and who better to talk about health than Dr. Vera Etches. Please welcome her now.
Thank you. Yes, I almost feel like I could just say everyone else this morning has said all the important things. I think I'm a little bit here to validate that there is science behind much of what was said. So I'll speak about this a bit more. And I want to start where the mayor started, or ended. I guess he ended saying that economic growth drives the capacity to address our other priorities in the city. So he said, when we're prioritizing things across the city, we will always keep economic growth there as the essential driver. I'm not going to disagree with him. I'm going to add to that to say we know that well-being depends on more than our economic growth and our GDP, and I know he would agree with that. That a healthy, thriving population is valued. We saw that. People took drastic action to protect their health. We also know it's a circle, it's linked, it's mutually reinforcing, that a healthy, thriving population is in fact needed for economic growth and for a thriving economy. And I do want to pause here just because I have a room full of so many people who led through the pandemic, led your workplaces, your organizations, in your communities. I just want to say thank you for all those actions, those difficult things you did to protect the health of people. It is significant, and I know the impact is enduring. We've heard it over and over this morning. And we've learned. So we appreciate that. And so what I want to say about how we build up Ottawa is that your decisions, the things we've talked about today, absolutely affect the health of people. And housing is one of those very fundamental determinants of health. It is pretty hard to be healthy without a home. And we see that in mortality rates, we see that in infectious disease transmission, invasive group A, strep as back, and over 50% of the cases are among people who are homeless. There are real measurable things we can see. Green space and the way we build parks and the way we have access to trees, this actually, you can look up the science, it affects our mental health. We do better when we have trees around us in terms of our mental well-being. The way we build our transportation systems and our neighborhoods to be complete, that makes the healthy choice, the easy choice, when you have the things you need to get to within a 10 to 15 minute walk. That 10 to 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a day, actually adds up to meeting your daily physical activity requirements to avoid chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension and even cancers, right? Physical activity is so important, and it doesn't work to tell people, go to the gym. You have to build it into our lives. And we can do that. This is what you're talking about. So I just keep going. It's great. I think there are other things that were mentioned today. I want to also underline, extremely important for health. The social connections, and again, this was so tough through the pandemic, but people health can be affected by social isolation even as much as smoking. And this is striking in terms of the impact on well-being. And the way we build, again, can connect people. It can create opportunities for that social connection. It's so important. So that's the piece about health outcomes and what you're talking about. The other thing I wanted to say is that, and it's been brought up, we are all connected. We saw this. We can think about it from the infectious disease point of view, but we saw it in terms of solutions and well-being in general, that we can't thrive unless everyone has the opportunity to have their basic needs met and do well in our city. And we see this is actually quite systemically the case that some people are denied opportunities. And this, in going forward and creating solutions, needs to be deliberately part of how we plan and tackle and build solutions, is to build those relationships with communities that are systemically denied influence and access to solutions. Indigenous populations know what they need to be well. We heard so much through the pandemic about the solutions for Black health. People have ideas and they know, and they need to be part of conversations. I think the thing I want to end on is, again, how much we have strengths in our city. I was just reading our new health status report on how's our city doing. Is coming out in June, and I was looking at it. We are doing better than Ontario on self-reported health. Actually, 67% of adults in Ottawa do meet their physical activity guidelines, compared to 55% in the rest of Ontario. That's a big difference. And part of it has to do with our environment, our natural environment, the investment in pathways and parks. But you know who doesn't have as much opportunity for physical activity is when we look at it across, it's people with lower incomes. And so I think it's specifically where we need to look at what are the opportunities for people with lower incomes. And as we build, investing in the public realm, in amenities that everyone can enjoy regardless of income, helps everyone, but it also addresses some of those barriers. And so again, I just really appreciate those who spoke just before me on this panel. We do need public and private and nonprofit sector solutions. And what I want to be part of, I'm very excited about, is that if we set out common goals that go beyond just the profit, that go into what are our quality of life goals for the City of Ottawa. What do we want to achieve? Let's measure more than the number of houses built. Let's measure more, around, is Ottawa delivering the quality of life, the healthy outcomes, the thriving places that we need? And Ottawa Public Health, that's the organization I lead, Ottawa Public Health lead, is redoing our vision. It's not that often that a public health agency says, oh, we're really going to aim for something different. But we are. We're adding a word, places, into our vision. So typically we've been about all people in Ottawa, are healthy and thriving. We are now going to be about all people and places in Ottawa are healthy and thriving, because it is the places where we live, the physical environments we experience, and the social environments we experience that determine our health. And so I really am excited to work with you. We're here to partner on especially measuring those health outcomes of the work that you do and how we build our city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Etches. Wonderful to hear from you again under less of a crisis. I think. So listen, I'm going to give the last 10 minutes back to all of you in the audience. So I think we'll break with our format a little bit and ask each of you, or not each of you, but some of you to put your hands forward bravely and ask a question about quality of life in our city. Who wants to be the first brave volunteer? Scanning the room. I've got lots of questions. Yes. Yeah, Catherine. We'll get a microphone to you, but Catherine's up here in the front. Here comes.
It's actually less of a question.
Or a comment, potentially.
Thank you so much for, you can hear me, right? Okay.
Yeah.
For your presentations. It's more of a comment that a lot of what you're saying in terms of social health and well-being is absolutely plugged into
branding. And so that's the whole idea about how everyone in this room and everything that we're doing here is we're all connected in terms of the city building aspect. But Dr. Etches, when you're talking about Ottawans, being above the median for Ontario in terms of meeting our physical activity requirements, that is something that when we did our extensive research for the branding work that we were undertaking for Ottawa tourism and the Ottawa brand, we discovered that Ottawa tops the charts in terms of the urban places in Canada in terms of outdoor activity and recreation opportunities, and that we are an incredibly active city. And the branding taught us to think about the market of other active travelers and how that would intersect very well with the Ottawa brand, because we have the things to offer to them that they're looking for. So I just wanted to say that the brand, the economic pieces, it absolutely intersects with what you're talking about. There were a few other examples, and I can't think of them all now, but thank you very much, because I think it just underscores how the work that you're all doing and the work that private sector is doing and high tech and tourism and all these other things is all connected.
Dr. Etches, a quick comment on that. So we have the evidence of a physical layout, wonderful outdoor pathway system. I think, as you indicated, that is, you believe, playing into making Ottawa healthier.
Yes.
It'll come on. Just keep speaking. They'll get it on.
Yes, it's when people have the ability to be physically active in their daily life. That's what makes the big difference. And then I was pointing to the fact that there are still these barriers to overcome for some populations. So lovely bike paths out here. Really good if you have a helmet and a bike,
Yes.
So let's think about overcoming some of those barriers as well. But yes, we have a lot of strengths in this city.
Maybe I'll sneak a question in for Jason and Katie. I was really interested in how your presentations complemented each other. So, Katie, you acknowledged that we need private sector home builders, and Jason, I think you might agree that in the private sector we might build some nonprofit houses once in a while. Maybe, Jason, just maybe riff off each other a little bit, talking to Katie, acknowledging the desire for both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, so funnily, during the break, the previous break, we were talking about kind of what was the best solution for producing affordable housing units, and we're kind of in simpatico of there's a real question about the capacity of the nonprofit development sector overall. If you look at Ottawa, realistically, there are 2 companies in Ottawa that produce that mission critical producing nonprofit housing, OCH, and then CADCO, which was spun off from CCOC. And the reality is, and this isn't just Ottawa, it's across many municipalities, is that capacity of that sector is not sufficient to produce the amount of sustainable, affordable housing that's required.
Katie, I love that you brought a little positivity there at the end of your presentation. Like it's not hopeless that we can tackle this. Can you speak maybe a little bit about the private sector? There are many developers, real estate people in the room here today. What role do they have in ending homelessness?
Yeah, so to be honest, I feel a bit put on the spot because there is a lot of synergy, but I also would say, most of the market is obviously private development. 80% of people are going to live in the private sector, rentals and homes. But ultimately, for a chunk of our population, nonprofit really is the only way to go. And it's simply because you have to remove a profit motive from something that's a human right. And that is the responsibility of governments. And so the scale piece is really critical. And Jason and I were chatting about this, and if there is some CMHC folks in the room, please build. We would love to see the federal government get back in the business of building, because to do it at scale actually needs to be an element of our work, has to be for the nonprofit sector in doing that. So private developers can absolutely play, and you see some great mixed opportunities like the Dream Legacy one that's happening at Laprade. There's some great options there, but at scale, ultimately, and I feel like I'm saying a hard truth here, at scale, it's really difficult if there needs to be profit. For that segment of the population, I think the rest of the market, it totally makes sense. But we do
do need to look at that. Canada has the lowest in the OECD of nonprofit housing. Internationally, we are about 4%. At our height, we were at about 10%. And you look at countries in Europe, 30%, 35%, 20% of their housing stock is nonprofit. And so it creates balance in the market. And that's a really important piece to making sure that everybody can actually access housing. But again, along that spectrum, when people are housed, they can work. When people have affordable housing, they can live here and be part of the community in significant ways. We get talent, we get population growth. And so it is really a both and. We need it all. But I would say there is a challenge when it's okay that the private sector needs to make money. It's fine. But it's just there's a portion that it cannot meet that need. And that's okay. So who can meet that need? And what does that look like when we're having a discussion? Okay, what's this lane and who's in this lane? And I think that's really where the conversation needs to be.
Good. Thank you for the clarification. So government really needs to reclaim its spot in building nonprofit is one thing you'd say. We got a couple more minutes for questions. Who's got one? If not, yes, we got a couple questions right here. Yes. Yeah, we'll get a microphone, but continue. Start with your question. We'll get a microphone in your hand.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I proudly represent Vanier here at the table. Thank you to all of you for your leadership. My question is this. I hear a lot of things today that are really great ideas. And I myself have had great ideas and have worked with some of you on the stage to try and make them happen. But the translation of that idea into the practicality is what I find very challenging. So for example, let's build really great 15-minute neighborhoods. Well, that's great, but last year, Planning Committee at the City of Ottawa approved a building on Beechwood without ground floor commercial. You can't have a 15-minute neighborhood if there aren't services available. So I'm wondering if you know of best practices or cities that are thriving in translating that idea into the practicality, because the challenge in Ottawa is not just the municipal government or the provincial government or the federal government, but the fact that all of them play together and depend on each other, and all of them have plans, and they don't always speak to each other. And so what happens is that we get stuck in this great idea, not doable. So I'm wondering, I'm literally looking for solutions. Katie, we'll be talking on Friday, but I really am looking for solutions.
And anyone, Natalie specifically, Jason or Katie, who would you like to address that? Well, Dr.
So it's clearly out of my area of expertise in terms of public health medicine, but I have been working with Inga Rosendahl, who's a health planner within Ottawa Public Health, and what I understand from her is that it does matter how the city's official plan is written and then translated into, see, am I getting this right? Translated into the community level plans, and even how each site plan is reviewed. So I'm going to stop there and pass it over to those who know more about that process.
That was really good. Yeah. No, that was pretty.
Keep going, Jason. Keep it rolling, and we'll go back to Katie then. Or Jennifer. Yeah, that's okay. That's what this is about. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So I would just add that I think from a transportation perspective, it's part of making sure we have the policies in place that support the directions, but then, the challenge is taking those policies and seeing them translated into projects. And that's the challenging part of it, but I think that's also where there's a lot of opportunities, because you've got all of these different opportunities that you can exploit. And so it's a matter of having that conversation, I think, with the different, at least again from the transportation perspective, talking with the people in the neighborhoods where those projects are located, really having a robust conversation to understand what the needs are, having a data-driven approach to what we're looking for. From a safety perspective, we're looking at collision statistics, and really taking the information that we're coming in from all of the engagement that we do, from the data, and then applying that policy lens over top of it to really try and to make the reality happen, despite sometimes that disconnect that we can see.
Yeah, good. Jason, you were going to address something.
The Ottawa already has an official plan. It's been approved, right? It sets our aspirational goals and what have you. I get very much, Royce and Don in the room right now. In translating it from our aspirational goals to actually what's concrete and what the built form and everything else is the comprehensive zoning bylaw, which is what the city is now working on. There are out right now public consultations on the policies for the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Get out there, take a look at them. If you can't find them, call me and I will direct you to the right spot. Go look at them. Contribute to the city your ideas on what the zoning should allow, what it should do, what you want it to facilitate. Royce is laughing at me now, but it's a very important part of outlining what you want the zoning to achieve, and how you want to see the city look at the end of the day. And the zoning is the concrete policy that allows or does not allow that to happen at the end.
And Katie, Dr. Vera.
Also, I think it is important for communities to understand the decisions made in zoning affect health. And so to say what you want in terms of a city that supports your health. And so that is part of what we're trying to raise awareness of.
Katie, we're going to give the final. Katie, we'll give you the final word.
Sure. So I think that ultimately it's really a pleasure to be in this room because I hear a lot of innovation and I hear a lot of creativity and a lot of risk-taking willingness. Ottawa is known by our branding to be potentially less risk-taking. There is a reason that Alberta is leading the way in reducing homelessness, and that's because there's a willingness to kind of move forward, try, test, fail, try again. And I think that this is a room of leaders who actually are quite willing and are already doing that. The pandemic has shaken us up to some degree, but I think in terms of implementation, it's a culture issue. At the end of the day, there's a culture issue at play, and we actually need to really be okay with making mistakes and testing things out and trying new. And I think that is growing. I think there's an appetite for that. But I just really encourage to get to implementation. People have done some pretty interesting things. I remember hearing about a city that actually had a test case. It was an American city, and they did a street exhibition where they broke every bylaw. And then they invited, city staff and city council to come and their local leaders to see what the street was like. And the street was amazing. It was amazing in terms of what they did with that public space. And then they got to have a conversation that said, hey, what's different about what we've done? And they showed them. And I think that's a big piece. Certainly in homelessness, one of the things we do is an immersive exercise where people have to look at what the system looks like. You have to navigate it. And it's almost like an automatic turnaround for people. They're like, oh, okay, I get it. So something about implementation is really connected to how we mobilize folks. And I really think this is a group of mobilized people, clearly, but we have opportunity where we need to bring our leaders along in that in serious ways. And so I just encourage creativity in doing that because, we've got the bones of everything that we need, but it really is a willingness to take that a step further and show, don't tell, but show.
What a beautiful point to conclude on. Round of applause for our Quality of Life panelists, Dr. Vera Etches, Katie Burkholder, Harris, Jason Berggraf, Jennifer Armstrong.
Today, the topic is innovative infrastructure, which I think we can all agree we need to think of in all of the senses, whether it's social infrastructure, transportation and mobility infrastructure, civic, civil, energy, green, natural infrastructure. We are thinking about all of these, and they're all foundations of success for the Building LeBreton project, and I'll break that down a little bit. Having the same, there we go. Okay, so just a quick tour through where we've been with the project and where we're going. Launched in March 2019, the Building LeBreton project aims to define and implement a renewed vision for a place of national and local pride at LeBreton Flats. So we created a bold but realistic vision to develop this area in a phased mixed-use development and ambitious parks and public realm.
Since we reopened Lansdowne together in 2014, Lansdowne has recaptured its position as Ottawa's gathering place. And the hub of sports and entertainment in our region. What attracted a couple of 100,000 people back before 2014 has now grown to over 4 million visitors annually coming to see our Red Blacks, our 67s, who sadly lost out of the playoffs last night, but did set a franchise, 55-year franchise record for points this year. Atletico Ottawa Soccer, the Ottawa Blackjacks basketball, as well as many other cultural and music events and international sports championships, including the awesome Men's World Curling Championship that happened in April and attracted over 80,000 visitors.
Byard Market Public Rental Plan, as a recap, is a $130 million investment plan that City Council approved back in January 2021. It involves 10 hectares of publicly owned land in a neighborhood that we refer to as Byard Market, which is about 19 hectares. The plan's tenets are to modernize the tired infrastructure that really hasn't been rejuvenated